Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. The crystal tumbler felt heavy in Harrison Shaw's hand as he savored his nightly bourbon, a small reward for closing the $200 million Riverside development deal. The amber liquid caught the dim hallway light as he passed his daughter's bedroom, preparing to share the good news with 17-year-old Lily. But her voice, pitched low and conspiratorial, stopped him cold. "Dad's so stupid, Emma." Lily's words sliced through the mahogany door. "He actually thinks Mom's upset about him traveling so much." Like, hello? Ryan practically lives here during Dad's business trips. Harrison's fingers tightened around the glass. The ice cubes clinked softly, a discordant note in the sudden silence of his world. I mean, they're not even subtle anymore. Lily's giggle twisted something in Harrison's chest. "Mom says once Dad's inheritance clears, we're all moving to Chicago together. New life, new start." The bourbon turned bitter on his tongue. Rebecca, his wife of 12 years. The woman he'd trusted to help raise Lily after Sarah's death. The same woman who'd encouraged him to take more business trips this past year, who'd insisted he focus on expanding Shaw Development's reach. Ryan says the timing has to be perfect. Lily's voice dropped lower, taking on an edge of importance that made Harrison lean closer. Once they have control of Shaw Developments, the board won't have a choice about approving the marina project. Not that it matters, the environmental impact study was totally faked anyway. The glass nearly slipped from Harrison's grip. Ryan. Not just any Ryan. Ryan Blackwood. The EPA oversight director who'd fast-tracked approvals for the marina project. The same man who'd been surprisingly amenable to every modification, every deadline adjustment. Harrison pulled back from the door, his mind racing through every interaction, every meeting. Those convenient inspection schedules. The way Rebecca always knew the status of his projects. The careful questions about his father's health. He moved silently down the hallway, each step measured and controlled. In his study, he placed the untouched bourbon on his desk and pulled out his phone. Not to confront. Not yet. First, he needed to understand the depth of the betrayal. 3 calls later, his private investigator Jack Monroe was heading to the office. "I need everything," Harrison said quietly. "Every meeting, every phone call, every document that's crossed my father's desk in the last year. Your wife's activities too?" Jack's voice was professional, careful. "Especially those." Harrison's gaze fell on the family photo on his desk. Rebecca, Lily, himself, all smiling, all lies. And Jack? "I need the real environmental impact data for the marina project. The actual studies, not the ones that crossed my desk. This is going to get expensive, Harrison." "Money's not an issue." Harrison opened his laptop, accessing the offshore accounts he'd maintained since Sarah's death. "What matters is discretion. No one can know we're looking. Especially not my daughter." After ending the call, Harrison poured himself a fresh bourbon. This one, he drained. The familiar burn couldn't match the cold fury building in his chest. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed their marriage, she'd corrupted his daughter, threatened his company, and compromised everything he'd built. But she'd made one critical mistake. She thought she was dealing with a broken man, someone too caught up in business to notice the decay in his own home. She didn't know about Geneva, about the contingencies he'd put in place after Sarah died. She didn't know that Harrison Shaw had learned long ago never to keep all his power in one place. The next morning, Harrison maintained his routine with practiced precision. Breakfast with the family. Coffee while Rebecca detailed her plans for redecorating the sunroom. A kiss goodbye as he headed to work. Instead, he met Jack in a private room at the Carlton Hotel. "It's worse than you thought," Jack said, spreading photos across the table. "Every business trip you've taken in the past 18 months coincided with EPA inspections at your project sites." Harrison studied the surveillance photos. Rebecca and Ryan entering hotels, restaurants, his own house. But it was the timestamps that told the real story. These meetings, Harrison tapped one photo. They're all scheduled around board votes or regulatory deadlines. They're organized, Jack confirmed. Your wife didn't stumble into this affair. She chose Ryan Blackwood specifically. "Look at these." More photos. Rebecca at lunch with other EPA officials. Ryan meeting with competitors who'd mysteriously withdrawn their bids on key properties. The marina project isn't their first target, Jack continued. They've done this before. Different cities, different companies. Ryan moves in, finds a vulnerable executive, and Rebecca provides the vulnerability, Harrison finished. His voice remained steady, but his eyes had turned to steel. What about my father? Jack hesitated. That's where it gets interesting. I spoke with his nurse, Maria Torres. Your wife visits every Tuesday afternoon. I know. She brings him magazines, keeps him company. She brings papers, legal documents disguised as medical forms. Your father's signature is on transfer authorizations, board resolution. Harrison's fist came down on the table, the first crack in his composure. He's dying of cancer, and they're using that to... He stopped, drawing in a deep breath. What's their endgame? Control. Jack pulled out more documents. Once your inheritance clears, you'll own controlling interest in Shaw Developments. But these transfers your father's been signing? They're setting up a complex web of shell corporations. On paper, you'll have the power. In reality, Rebecca and Ryan will control everything. Harrison stood, moving to the window. Below, Chicago's business district hummed with activity, oblivious to the betrayal being orchestrated in its midst. And my daughter? She's been their eyes and ears. Every time you've worked from home, every private call she's been reporting back. Her trust fund isn't just generous, Harrison. It's being managed by one of Ryan's shell companies. Harrison's reflection in the window showed no emotion, but his words carried deadly weight. They've turned my child into a spy. There's one more thing. Jack pulled out a final folder. Your first wife's accident? I found some irregularities in the original investigation. Harrison turned slowly. Sarah's death wasn't random? I need more time to confirm, but Jack's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowning. Your wife just accessed your father's medical records. She's moving faster than we expected. No, Harrison said quietly. She's moving exactly as I need her to. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number from memory. Thomas? It's Harrison Shaw. I need to see my father's lawyer. Tonight. The law offices of Brandenburg and Associates cast long shadows in the Chicago twilight. Harrison sat across from Gerald Brandenburg, his father's lawyer of 30 years, watching as the older man reviewed the documents Jack had provided. This is... Gerald removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. Harrison, this is systematic corporate theft. These medical forms your father signed? They're transferring control of key subsidiaries to offshore entities. Can it be reversed? Some of it. But Harrison, there's more. Gerald pulled out another file. Your daughter's trust fund? The one Rebecca insisted on setting up last year? It's structured as a corporate holding company. Once these transfers are complete, Lily will technically control 30% of Shaw Development's voting rights, which Rebecca will control until Lily turns 25. Harrison's voice was ice. They're using my daughter as a corporate puppet. Exactly. And with Ryan Blackwood's position at the EPA, they can force through the marina project approval, tank the company's value, and walk away with millions while destroying everything my father built. Harrison stood, moving to the window. The city lights blurred into a constellation of betrayal. What they don't know is that I've been expecting something like this. Not this exactly, but something. Gerald raised an eyebrow. The Geneva account? After Sarah died, I learned the hard way that trust is a luxury I can't afford. Harrison turned back to the desk. Show me everything they've signed, everything they've moved. I need to know exactly what pieces they think they control. For the next hour, they traced the web of deception. Shell companies nested within holding companies. Offshore accounts linked to seemingly legitimate businesses. And at the center, the marina project, a development that would make millions on paper while devastating the local ecosystem. The real environmental impact study, Harrison said finally. Where is it? Gerald opened his briefcase, removing a sealed envelope. Your father had it conducted privately months ago. The results? They're devastating, Harrison. If this data becomes public, the company would survive. Barely. But the criminal charges for submitting false environmental data? Harrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those would be harder to overcome. What are you planning? Justice. Harrison took the envelope. But first, I need you to draft new papers. Transfer documents, board resolutions, everything they've done. I want parallel versions, all legitimate, all ready to file. You're going to trap them with their own plan?
No.
Harrison's voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. I'm going to let them think they've won. Then I'm going to show them what a real corporate takeover looks like. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. Rebecca will be home soon, expecting to find me drunk and angry about the deal closing. Instead, she'll find dinner reservations and champagne. You're celebrating? I'm setting the stage. Harrison gathered his coat. They think they're destroying my life. I'm going to let them think that until the moment I destroy theirs. As he left the office, Harrison's phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Coming home late, Dad. Study group with Emma. He texted back, no problem, sweetie. Love you. The words tasted like ash, but Harrison Shaw had learned long ago that revenge, like business, required a perfect poker face. Let them think they were winning. Let them think he was blind. Geneva was waiting. And unlike Rebecca, Harrison knew the value of patience. In his car, he made one final call. Jack, I need you to find out everything you can about Lily's friend Emma. Something about that connection doesn't feel right. The pieces were in place. The game was set. And Harrison Shaw had no intention of being the fool they thought he was. Rebecca Shaw's morning began like any other day of entitled luxury. She sipped Dom Prignan at her favorite salon while scrolling through property listings in Chicago's Gold Coast. The text from her American Express concierge was the first ripple in her perfectly curated world. Mrs. Shaw, we're unable to process your annual membership renewal. She dismissed it as a technical glitch until her platinum card was declined for a mere $12,000 handbag at Bergdorf's. The sales associate's smirk made her blood boil. Try this one, Rebecca demanded, slapping down her private black card. Declined. Each successive card met the same fate, her face burning hotter with each rejection. Her phone buzzed, Ryan Blackwood's name flashing on the screen. Emergency. Office. Now. She found him in his EPA office, the usual arrogant swagger replaced by barely contained panic. Spread across his desk were documents she never expected to see in the light of day. He knows. Ryan's hands shook as he held up the divorce papers. Not just about us. Everything. Rebecca snatched the filing from his grip, her practiced poise crumbling as she read. Harrison hadn't just filed for divorce, he'd submitted comprehensive federal whistleblower documentation. Every falsified environmental study, every manipulated inspection, every bribed official documented with a precision that made her stomach turn. Impossible, she hissed. We controlled every variable. The real studies were destroyed. Apparently not. Ryan pulled up his banking app. All my offshore accounts are frozen. Federal investigation pending. Even the Cayman transfers are locked. Rebecca's phone lit up with notifications. Their joint accounts drained. Her private accounts frozen. But it was the alert from her daughter's trust fund that made her manicured nails dig into her palms. All holdings converted to Shaw Development shares. That son of a bitch, she snarled. He's turned everything into worthless paper. Once this environmental data goes public, we'll be ruined, Ryan finished. And that's if we avoid prison. Her lawyer called next. Rebecca had always enjoyed the way Andrew Porter cringed when she berated him. Not today. Mrs. Shaw, the FBI. She hung up, her hand shaking. Where would he go? She demanded. Harrison doesn't just vanish. He's too arrogant, too controlling. Ryan handed her a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. Harrison's precise handwriting carried a message that chilled her more than the empty accounts. Check the real environmental impact data. What game is he playing? Rebecca's voice rose to a pitch that would have embarrassed her in calmer moments. No game. Ryan's face had gone ashen. This morning's mail brought subpoenas for every project I've overseen in the last 5 years. Harrison didn't just run, he orchestrated a symphony of destruction. Neither noticed the small red light blinking on Ryan's office phone, recording every panicked admission for an FBI surveillance team. In the parking garage below, Maria Torres, known to them only as Walter Shaw's nurse, sat in an unmarked car with her FBI radio. "Subjects are in place," she murmured, "recording everything." The next 72 hours became a masterclass in systematic destruction. Every attempt to access funds triggered deeper audits. Each call to corporate contacts revealed blocked access. Rebecca's carefully cultivated network of influence crumbled like the fraud it had always been. "You don't understand," she snapped at her fourth lawyer in 3 days. "I need those accounts unfrozen now. Do you know who I am?" A soon-to-be defendant in a federal fraud case, Andrew Porter replied with newfound spine. "Every transaction attempt creates new evidence. You're doing their job for them, then discredit him." Rebecca's composure shattered. "Mental breakdown, creative accounting, whatever it takes. That's what I pay you for." "Not anymore. I'm withdrawing as counsel." Porter's tone shifted to one she'd never heard him use: honesty. "This isn't just environmental fraud. Money laundering, conspiracy, corporate espionage. Find a criminal defense attorney, Mrs. Shaw. You'll need one." The line went dead. Rebecca hurled her phone across her marble-floored living room, shattering a crystal vase from her wedding. She stared at the fragments, remembering Harrison's face as she'd opened that gift. Had he known even then? Had he seen through her? Her phone buzzed from among the crystal shards. "Lily." "Mom?" Her daughter's voice carried an unfamiliar edge. "Something's wrong. I tried warning Ryan about the FBI, but my calls—" "You did what?" Rebecca's blood ran cold. "On your phone? The one your father—" She caught herself too late. "The one Dad what?" Steel entered Lily's voice. "Did you know my phones were tapped? That every call I made trying to warn Ryan just became evidence?" "Lily, listen careful." "No, you listen." The teenager's voice cracked with fury. "The FBI just showed me transcripts. Every conversation. Every time you and Ryan used me to spy on Dad. My trust fund? It wasn't for college. It was payment for gathering intelligence. We were protecting you," Rebecca tried. "Your father's projects would have. Save it. They're asking about Sarah too. Dad's first wife? The accident that wasn't an accident." The line went dead, leaving Rebecca alone with memories she tried to bury. Sarah's death had been before her time, but she knew the organization had arranged it, just like they'd arranged her chance meeting with Harrison afterward. A grieving man, a sympathetic shoulder. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Mrs. Shaw. A woman's voice, clinical in its professionalism. "Agent Catherine Martinez, FBI. Let's discuss your Tuesday visits to Walter Shaw's nursing home." Rebecca sank onto her imported silk sofa. The nurse. The weekly visits. The papers. "The hidden camera footage is particularly interesting," Martinez continued. "Would you like to come in voluntarily, or should we send a car?" Special Agent Catherine Martinez watched through one-way glass as Rebecca Shaw's carefully constructed world dissolved into orange polyester and fingerprint ink. Beside her, Emma, her daughter. Her ace in the hole, shed her teenage persona like an outgrown skin. "Lily's asking questions," Emma reported. "About me. About everything. She's starting to piece it together." Catherine studied her daughter's reflection in the glass. At 17, Emma had already mastered skills that had taken Catherine years to develop. "You got closer than any other agent could. Harrison's evidence combined with your recordings. It's bulletproof. It's bigger than Rebecca and Ryan now," Emma said. "Lily's talking. Names, dates, other projects. She didn't understand what she was part of, but she remembered everything. Like father, like daughter." Catherine's voice softened. This case had cost her daughter something precious, perhaps her last chance at a normal teenage friendship. "Harrison's handler is bringing him in from protective custody next week. Phase 2 begins." In another interview room, Lily Shaw sat surrounded by transcripts of her own betrayal. "I didn't know," she repeated, mascara tracing black rivers down her cheeks. "About Sarah. About any of it. I thought Mom loved him." Agent Thomas Chin, Harrison's FBI handler, studied the girl who'd unknowingly helped expose a decades-long conspiracy. "Tell me about the first time your mother introduced you to Ryan. The real story." Lily's hands trembled as she wiped her eyes. "It was before Dad's Seattle trip. Mom said Ryan was an old friend, that he needed help fixing some environmental problems. She said Dad was too focused on profits, that sometimes good people had to bend rules. She stopped, fresh tears falling. She made it sound noble, like we were saving something instead of destroying it. And Emma? Chon kept his voice gentle. When did she enter the picture? Last year. New girl at school. We just connected. Lily's voice broke. Was any of it real? Was she just another lie? Chen glanced at the mirror, knowing Catherine was listening. Emma Martinez made a choice to help stop some very bad people, just like your father did. Just like you're doing now. My father. Lily looked up, eyes red but finally clear. Where is he? Is he safe? He's safe, Chen assured her. And when this is over, you'll understand why he had to disappear. Why he had to let you think he'd abandoned everything. In her office, Catherine reviewed Harrison Shaw's latest transmission. Pages of account numbers, shell companies, offshore transactions, a decade of corruption mapped with architectural precision. But it was the last page that caught her eye, a photograph of Sarah Shaw on her wedding day, smiling at a future she'd never see. Her secure line bust. Martinez. Geneva's ready. Harrison's voice carried the calm of a man who'd waited 20 years for this moment. Time to show them what a real conspiracy looks like. Catherine smiled, thinking of Emma's sacrifice, of Lily's tears, of Sarah's photograph. Rebecca thought she'd married a businessman. She'd actually married an architect of revenge, someone who'd spent 2 decades designing the perfect trap. Now that trap was ready to spring, and Catherine Martinez had a front-row seat to what promised to be the most elegant demolition in FBI history. In his secure location, Harrison Shaw closed his encrypted laptop and studied his own copy of Sarah's photograph. Almost done? Love, he whispered. Almost done. The Chicago Tribune's front page dominated every newsstand across the city's financial district. Environmental scandal claims another. EPA Director Ryan Blackwood sentenced. Below the headline, a photo showed Ryan being led into the federal courthouse, his once pristine suit replaced by prison orange, his trademark arrogance shattered by 3 years of investigation. In a secured interview room, Lily Shaw reviewed transcripts of her own recorded conversations. At 20, she carried herself with a hardened grace that came from surviving betrayal. Gone were the designer clothes her mother had used to buy her loyalty. Instead, she wore a simple black blazer and slacks, practical armor for practical times. Special Agent Thomas Chin set another stack of files on the table. Walk me through the trust fund payments again. When did you first notice the pattern? Junior year, after Dad's Seattle project. Lily's fingers traced the deposit records. $10,000 appeared after I told Mom about his private calls. $20,000 after I forwarded his emails. She called them performance bonuses for helping protect the environment. Chen nodded, opening a folder filled with surveillance photos. Your mother was systematic. Each payment coincided with specific information leaks. I was so stupid. Lily's laugh held no warmth. The amounts kept growing. $50,000 after I installed her special software on Dad's home office computer. $100,000 when I started recording his board meetings. She picked up one of the photos Rebecca at a charity gala, arm in arm with another CEO who'd later been indicted. How many others were there before Dad? We've confirmed 3 other executives. All development companies, all with major environmental projects. Chun spread out more photographs. Your mother spent years perfecting her approach. Find a vulnerable target, usually a widower or recent divorcee. Establish emotional connection. Then slowly compromise them through their children, like she did with me. You were different, Lily. You fought back. Your testimony has helped us unravel corruption cells in 12 states. Across the building, Rebecca Shaw sat in her own interview room, orange jumpsuit clashing with her still-perfect manicure. Federal prosecutor Diana Hawthorne reviewed notes from 3 years of investigation. Let's discuss the Marina project timeline, Hawthorne said. When did you first target Harrison Shaw? Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. You make it sound so calculated. Harrison was grieving. I provided comfort, like you provided comfort to James Anderson in Seattle? Or Michael Chun in San Francisco? Hawthorne slid more photographs across the table. Both widowers. Both with teenage children. both running companies with major environmental projects. Mere coincidence. What about Sarah Shaw's accident? Still claiming that was coincidence too. For a moment, Rebecca's mask slipped. That was before my involvement. I simply followed the established protocol. Protocol from whom? You know I won't answer that. Her composure returned. But I will say this: Harrison was supposed to break. They all break eventually. Instead, she gestured at her prison uniform. Well, you can see how that turned out. A commotion erupted in the hallway. Ryan Blackwood, being escorted to his sentencing hearing, caught sight of Rebecca through the door's window. His face contorted with rage. "You promised me protection," he shouted, struggling against his guards. "You said the offshore accounts were untraceable." Mr. Blackwood, his lawyer, attempted to intervene. "She planned everything. The fake studies, the bribes, Sarah Shaw's death, it was all Rebecca. She's been running this operation for years." As guards dragged him away, Rebecca's carefully constructed defense crumbled under the weight of Ryan's desperate accusations. The private banking floor of Credit Suisse exuded old-world discretion, from its mahogany panels to the hushed conversations in multiple languages. Harrison Shaw sat across from Anton Mueller, the bank's chief of private client services, watching as a vault sealed for 2 decades was finally opened. "The documents remained exactly as you left them, Mr. Shaw," Mueller said, placing a weathered leather portfolio on the desk. Though the FBI's authentication request was unusual, Special Agent Catherine Martinez observed as Harrison opened the portfolio. Inside lay the fruits of 20 years' patience. Photographs, account ledgers, trading records, a meticulously documented trail of corruption. But the true prize was a single USB drive containing every original environmental impact study his father had commissioned. Walter Shaw was thorough, Martinez noted, examining a particularly detailed series of photographs showing Rebecca meeting with known environmental crime figures. He tracked them for years. "My father understood patience." Harrison's voice carried no emotion as he sorted through 2 decades of evidence. He knew they'd try again after Sarah. He just needed someone they'd underestimate. So he let them send Rebecca. Knowing I'd already established the Geneva account, knowing I'd recognized their pattern when it emerged, Harrison allowed himself a small smile. They thought they were corrupting another grieving executive. They didn't realize they were walking into a 20-year trap. The evidence from Geneva went far beyond Rebecca and Ryan. It exposed a network of corrupt officials spanning multiple agencies, compromised environmental projects across 3 continents, and a web of shell companies that made the Marina project look like a high school science experiment. "This is just the beginning," Martinez said, reviewing account numbers that led to more prominent names. "With these records, we can track the money all the way to the top." "That was always the plan." Harrison closed the portfolio. "My father knew direct confrontation would fail. They killed Sarah for far less evidence than this. He needed someone on the inside, someone they thought they could control, and they chose you. They chose poorly." The federal courthouse buzzed with tension as Rebecca's sentencing approached. 3 years of investigations had exposed corruption at every level of environmental oversight, but today justice would finally catch up with its architect. Judge Eleanor Martinez studied the pre-sentencing report, her expression growing darker with each page. Before pronouncing sentence, several matters must be addressed. She fixed Rebecca with a steely gaze. The death of Sarah Shaw was not an accident. Evidence gathered by Walter Shaw and later compiled by Harrison Shaw proves conclusively that it was orchestrated by the defendant's organization. Mrs. Shaw was targeted after discovering fraudulent environmental impact studies, the same pattern of corruption this court has spent 3 years unraveling. Rebecca's face remained impassive, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the defense table. Furthermore, the judge continued, the defendant's subsequent marriage to Harrison Shaw was not coincidence but calculation. The court has reviewed evidence showing a systematic pattern of targeting bereaved executives through their children, using family connections to facilitate environmental crimes. In the gallery, Lily watched her mother's mask finally crack. Every bedtime story, every shopping trip, every moment of supposed maternal love, all exposed as tactical moves in a decades-long con. The cooperation of Emma Martinez provided crucial documentation of the defendant's methods, Judge Martinez noted. The recorded conversations between Miss Shaw and Miss Martinez revealed not just individual crimes, but an entire methodology of corruption. Lily glanced at Emma, seated with Catherine across the courtroom. Their friendship had survived the truth perhaps because Emma's initial deception had led to something genuine. This court views the defendant's actions as representing the worst form of environmental crime, the judge declared. Using family bonds to facilitate corporate fraud, manipulating a child into betraying her own father, participating in a conspiracy that resulted in Sarah Shaw's death. The damage to both the environment and human lives is incalculable. The sentence fell like a hammer. 30 years without parole, complete asset forfeiture, and restitution exceeding $50 million. As Rebecca was led away, Harrison entered silently through a side door. He hadn't attended the trial, hadn't given her the satisfaction of seeing him testify. But this moment, this final confirmation that justice transcended generations, he needed to witness. Their eyes met briefly. Rebecca saw not the vulnerable widower she'd targeted, but an architect of vengeance who'd spent 20 years ensuring her destruction. Harrison saw not his wife of 12 years, but a trap that had finally snapped shut on its maker. Later, in his restored office at Shaw Developments, Harrison arranged 3 photographs on his wall. Sarah, smiling on their wedding day. His father, whose patient accumulation of evidence had made justice possible. And a new addition, Lily and Emma at their college graduation, proof that truth could forge stronger bonds than deception. Between them, he placed the original environmental impact study from Geneva, a reminder that some legacies are measured not in profit margins, but in debts finally paid. A knock at his door preceded Lily's entrance. "Dad? The FBI's task force wants to brief us. They've identified 3 more companies with suspicious environmental studies." Harrison turned to his daughter, seeing in her face the strength that had emerged from betrayal. "You're still working with them?" "Emma and I both are. Someone has to protect the next family they target." Lily moved to stand beside him, studying the photographs. "I understand now why Grandpa kept gathering evidence even when he couldn't use it. Why you waited so long to spring the trap. Justice requires patience," Harrison said, "and strength to see it through. Like you had. Like we all did." Outside his office window, Chicago's skyline reached toward the future. Somewhere in those towers, other corrupt networks were already moving to fill the void left by Rebecca's organization. But they'd find a different landscape now, one where truth had proven stronger than greed, and justice no longer required a grieving man's lifelong vengeance to prevail. The real environmental impact study remained in Geneva, proof that some victories aren't measured in stock prices or profit margins, but in the simple triumph of right over wrong, of patience over corruption, of truth over the most elaborate lies. In his desk drawer, Harrison kept one final piece of evidence, a photograph he'd never shown the FBI. It showed Rebecca meeting with a figure whose identity would shake the very foundations of environmental oversight. But that, he knew, was a battle for another day. Some traps required decades to set, and Harrison Shaw had learned the value of patience. Epilogue. 10 years later. The Federal Correctional Institution in Waseca, Minnesota, was a far cry from Rebecca Shaw's former Gold Coast penthouse. The woman who once orchestrated environmental crimes worth billions now spent her days in an 8x10 cell, her designer wardrobe replaced by prison-issue khaki, her perfectly manicured hands roughened by mandatory labor. 13 years into her 30-year sentence, with all appeals exhausted, Rebecca's arrogance had finally crumbled. The isolation wing where she resided, a consequence of multiple attempts to manipulate other inmates, offered ample time to reflect on her downfall. Her last visitor had been 3 years ago, a federal prosecutor seeking information about other members of her organization. Rebecca's attempt to negotiate had backfired spectacularly when they revealed they already had everything they needed from Ryan Blackwood. Ryan, her former partner in crime, had broken completely. Serving his 25-year sentence in a medium-security facility in Colorado, he'd turned state's evidence against everyone he'd ever worked with. His cooperation had helped unravel corruption cases in 14 states, though it hadn't reduced his own sentence. The last Rebecca heard, Ryan spent his days in protective custody, jumping at shadows, convinced that former associates would eventually reach him. His fears weren't entirely unfounded. 3 other members of their former network had met suspicious ends in various prisons across the country. Meanwhile, Shaw Developments had not only survived but thrived. Harrison's exposure of the corruption ring had ironically positioned the company as a leader in environmental compliance. Under his leadership, they'd pioneered a transparent approach to development that set new industry standards. The Chicago Business Journal's latest profile of Harrison, Shaw painted a picture of redemption and innovation. The article sat on Rebecca's metal desk, its headline a daily reminder of her failure. Shaw Developments leads Green Revolution. CEO Harrison Shaw receives Presidential Environmental Award. The photo showed Harrison at the White House ceremony, distinguished in his 50s, still handsome but harder somehow. Beside him stood Lily, now 30, a federal prosecutor specializing in environmental crimes. The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca. The daughter she tried to corrupt had become a weapon against everything she'd built. Emma Martinez featured in the article too. After graduating from law school, she joined Lily in the Justice Department. The friendship Rebecca had tried to exploit had evolved into a formidable legal partnership. Together, they'd secured convictions in some of the largest environmental fraud cases in history. Catherine Martinez had retired from the FBI, but her legacy continued. The task force she'd helped create had expanded into an international operation, tracking environmental crimes across borders. She still consulted occasionally, especially when Shaw Development's expertise was needed to unravel complex corporate fraud. The old nurse, Maria Torres, the undercover agent who documented Rebecca's manipulation of Walter Shaw, had received a commendation for her role in the investigation. She'd gone on to train other agents in long-term undercover operations, using the Shaw case as a template. Walter Shaw hadn't lived to see Rebecca's sentencing, but his foresight had changed environmental law enforcement forever. The evidence he'd accumulated, combined with Harrison's strategic patience, had exposed corruption at every level of regulatory oversight. The file Harrison had kept in Geneva didn't just end Rebecca's organization, it sparked investigations that reached into corporate boardrooms, regulatory agencies, and even Congress. Each conviction carried a piece of Walter Shaw's legacy, a testament to one man's dedication to justice. Sarah Shaw's death had finally been officially ruled a homicide, though the actual perpetrators remained elusive. The cold case unit still received anonymous tips occasionally, each one meticulously investigated. Harrison had never stopped searching for the whole truth about his first wife's murder. In his office at Shaw Development's new headquarters, a model of sustainable architecture, Harrison kept an updated wall of photographs. Sarah and Walter remained central, joined now by newer images. Lily receiving her law degree, Emma and Catherine at FBI awards ceremonies, the dedicated team that had helped rebuild the company. The original environmental impact study from Geneva had been donated to a law school's environmental crimes division, used to train future prosecutors in detecting corporate fraud. Its findings had helped establish new standards for environmental review, turning Shaw Development's darkest hour into a catalyst for industry-wide reform. Lily's personal life had taken an unexpected turn. She'd married David Chin, son of Agent Thomas Chin, creating another bond between the families that had exposed Rebecca's crimes. Their 2 children would never know their grandmother except as a cautionary tale about greed and betrayal. The trust fund money that Rebecca had used to buy Lily's complicity had been channeled into a foundation supporting environmental whistleblowers. Each year, it helped expose new crimes, protect new witnesses, and ensure that other families wouldn't face the same corruption that had nearly destroyed the Shaws. Emma had declined to follow her mother Catherine into the FBI, preferring to fight environmental crime from the Justice Department, but she'd inherited Catherine's instincts. Her current investigation, still confidential, suggested that some of Rebecca's old associates had started rebuilding their network. Harrison watched these developments with careful attention. The photograph he'd kept hidden, the one showing Rebecca with a figure whose identity could shake environmental oversight to its core, had finally served its purpose. The investigation it sparked was proceeding quietly, methodically, with the same patience that had brought Rebecca down. In her prison cell, Rebecca had one final reminder of her defeat. The commissary television occasionally showed news about Shaw Development's latest environmental initiatives. Each broadcast was a testament to what she'd failed to destroy, a company that had emerged stronger, more principled, and more successful than ever. She'd written to Lily once, years ago, attempting to manipulate her daughter one last time. Lily's response had been simple: a copy of her federal prosecutor's badge and a note reading, "Justice finds its own path." Ryan, in his separate prison, had deteriorated further. His attempts to write a tell-all book had been blocked by the courts, his remaining assets seized for restitution. The brilliant EPA director who'd once commanded respect through fear now commanded nothing, not even his daily routine. The Marina Project site, the development that had triggered Rebecca's downfall, had been transformed into an environmental research center. Scientists there studied the ecosystem she tried to destroy, their work funded by penalties paid by convicted conspirators. Harrison's patient vengeance had rippled far beyond Chicago. Environmental crime units worldwide now studied the Shaw case, learning how corruption could hide behind corporate veils and family ties. Rebecca's methodology had become a textbook example of how not to succeed in corporate crime. The scale of justice that Walter Shaw had first set in motion had finally balanced. His son had transformed a personal vendetta into systemic change. His granddaughter prosecuted crimes he'd first documented. And somewhere in Geneva, in a quiet bank vault, other evidence waited proof that some legacies of justice spanned generations. Rebecca had one final decade to serve, assuming good behavior she'd never managed to maintain. Ryan had 15 years left, his cooperation buying him little mercy from judges who'd seen the full scope of his crimes. Their invisible masters had largely escaped justice, but their power had been broken. And in his office, overlooking a cleaner, more vigilant Chicago, Harrison Shaw kept planning, kept watching, kept building. The photograph in his desk suggested there was more work to be done. But he had learned from his father that justice requires patience, and from Sarah that some debts demand a lifetime to repay. The environmental impact study in Geneva had started it all, but it was the impact of truth, slow-moving but unstoppable, that had finally written an ending even Rebecca couldn't corrupt.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
In my early years, I was often misunderstood by those around me. Growing up with Asperger's syndrome in a world where social norms seemed second nature to others made daily interactions challenging. My family, as well-meaning as they were, often struggled to understand my way of seeing things, my literal interpretations, and my unique communication style. From a young age, I found comfort in structure and routines, preferring the order of numbers and facts over the abstract flow of social cues. This difference shaped much of my childhood and education. Teachers noticed my tendency to focus on specific details, while peers labeled me the odd one out for my unique perspective. Over time, however, I developed a talent for analysis and problem-solving, skills that would later be invaluable in my personal and professional life. As I navigated my journey, I found inspiration in book and film characters who, like me, were unique, recognizing myself in their stories of overcoming obstacles. Remember the critically acclaimed film Rain Man? Dustin Hoffman won an Academy Award for his portrayal of Raymond Babbitt, an autistic character with extraordinary skills. Although I'm not as affected, I live with Asperger's syndrome. For the most part, I blend in, though with my own quirks. Unlike many, I struggle to read unspoken social cues, where others might notice subtle hints, like someone checking their watch to end a conversation. I miss those signals. My world is defined by logic, directness, and an adherence to structure, making social situations especially complex. You know people with Asperger's. We're computer nerds, rocket scientists, quirky programmers. Think of Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. I'm precise. As a CNN commentator once wrote, "We usually show little expression in our faces or voices. I can't look you in the eyes. I've learned to look at people's mouths or noses. I can't hold a casual conversation for long, but I can give you a lecture on topics like U.S. atomic bomb tests, Pittsburgh steelworkers, Doberman puppies, or medieval society. We excel in school because we follow rules, which makes us good employees if given specific tasks and goals. But overall, we don't make the best managers. Why a whole week off for a funeral? It's just one day," I once told a boss. Maybe your boss wasn't difficult, just an aspie. My parents passed away when I was young, and I was a constant source of surprise and confusion to my grandparents. They had raised 6 children, none of whom spent as much time in the principal's office as I did, mostly due to the questions I raised in class. I'd ask, "If this is anti-bullying week, what was last week?" Or, "In case of fire, why line up from shortest to tallest? Do tall people burn slower?" And why is Black History Month in February the shortest month? Though I was an excellent student and even received a scholarship, my grandfather often muttered, "There's something not right with this boy." I never dated in high school. Unfamiliar with the mind games and mental tricks girls used on teenage boys, I read everything. My grandfather, a practical military man, hired a courtesan for my 18th birthday. I was thrilled, and like any teenager, I arranged regular visits with her when I could afford it. No good deed goes unpunished. This led to my first big novel. I was filling my gas tank near the shopping center before starting my Meals on Wheels route for seniors. Not because I'm a good person, but as part of my scholarship requirement, and I chose it to avoid other employees. Once I started, I found people fascinating. These seniors had survived the Great Depression, fought in wars, and built our country into an economic powerhouse. I loved hearing their stories. From bootlegging to storming Normandy to union struggles, they were my living history books. They loved to share stories with anyone who would listen. One day, as I paid for gas, a young girl ran past, chased by 2 guys, a big one and a smaller one, a Mutt and Jeff pair. They circled my car several times, which was still parked at the pump. Suddenly, the girl jumped into my car and locked the doors. Mutt and Jeff banged on the hood and roof, yelling at her. The store clerk was calling emergency when I walked over. "Hey, you two," I said to the men who were still yelling at the trapped girl, denting my car. "Back away from my car." The smaller man, whom I mentally called Mutt, looked at me. "This your car?" he asked authoritatively. When I didn't answer, Mutt continued, "Open it, idiot, so we can get this girl." "Not a chance," I replied. "We'll wait for the police. They're already on the way. I need a report for insurance. Plus, you both owe me for the damage. This was my grandmother's car, and she kept it pristine. I washed it every Saturday at 5 p.m. with premium mother's wax." "Shut up, idiot," Jeff snapped, adding, "The cops are already here, so unlock this junk." I looked at Mutt and Jeff. They had no uniforms, no visible badges. "Could I see some ID or badge, please?" Mutt stepped closer. "We don't have time for this," he muttered to Jeff, then grabbed my arm, trying to twist it painfully. Here's where I need to add a little context. Children with Asperger's syndrome are frequently bullied since our physical coordination often develops later, making us the last pick for any team in PE class. Combine that with an inability to respond effectively to teasing and sarcasm, and, well, you get the picture. To counter this, I was enrolled in martial arts early on to improve my coordination, build confidence, and learn to handle bullies. After attending several classes, I found that a modified form of Aikido was the best fit for my training. The Aikido I learned was based mainly on responding to an opponent's movements. I was taught not to react until someone made physical contact, a rule that suited my Asperger's black and white view of the world. Words and ridicule could be ignored, but physical actions allowed a response. I trained 3 times a week and on Saturdays at a local Aikido center. It became like a second home. Fast forward to the present, and Mutt's face showed shock as I countered his arm grab with a move I'd practiced countless times in Aikido class. Dropping to one knee, I spun under his arm, using my weight and his momentum to flip Mutt over my shoulder, leaving him gasping for air. Standing up, I stated, "You touched me first. Please don't try it again." The girl in my car screamed, while behind me Jeff charged forward, arms wide, head down, ready for a football-style tackle. This feels just like my last belt test, I thought as Jeff's fingers neared my hands. I fell backward, raising a leg to kick him in the stomach, and grabbed his outstretched forearms, pulling him down as I pushed off with my foot. Jeff flipped over, landing near a gas pump. Rolling to my feet, I heard the girl in my car laugh. "You two idiots can't even take down one guy. Need more friends before you get hurt?" Her laughter continued, but I stayed serious. These guys weren't backing down. Jeff quickly jumped up, pulling out what looked like a taser. I saw blue sparks flash and heard the electric buzz. We'd never trained against tasers, but I treated it like a sharp weapon, dodging and weaving to keep Jeff off balance. When I had the right opening, I moved to his side, struck his elbow upwards, and directed the wrist holding the taser downward. Jeff yelped as his hand and the taser dunked into a bucket of windshield washer fluid. I didn't know the exact properties of windshield fluid, but apparently, it conducts electricity well. Over 1,500 volts surged through Jeff's hand and into his body. He convulsed, collapsing by the bucket with his hand still submerged, limbs twitching. Then Mutt charged at me again, this time wielding a collapsible baton. I hopped over Jeff, who was still spasming, and pulled out a wooden-handled scraper from the bucket. Mutt wasn't skilled with the baton, making it easy for me to parry his attacks. I hooked his ankle with the scraper's T-end, causing him to stumble backward. The girl in my car laughed again, but her laughter stopped when Mutt lifted his pant leg to reveal an ankle holster. He pulled out a .38 caliber pistol, aiming it at me. "Stop, idiot," he barked. "I'm serious." In Aikido, we train to defend against different weapons. The advice was, run from a knife, rush a tool. A knife can't injure you from a distance, but a tool can. So, I advanced toward Mutt, crouching low. 2 shots fired, and the back window of my car shattered, the girl inside screaming. Mutt looked stunned as I closed in, disarmed him, and had him on the ground just as 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing. Officers leapt out, tools drawn, ordering me to drop my weapon. I released the pistol and raised my hands, but Mutt seized the moment to kick me in the head, and everything went dark. I'll spare you the details, but I spent over 24 hours in a jail cell after Mutt and Jeff handcuffed me to a chair and knocked me severely. It wasn't like in the movies. They didn't let me make a phone call or tell me you have the right to remain silent, as you see in police shows. I think Mutt and Jeff were actual cops, because they were the ones who knocked me while I was cuffed to the chair. After that, the other prisoners left me alone. Apparently knocking 2 cops earns respect. On the second day, the jailers, who had been indifferent until then, suddenly grew uneasy. Some tried to emphasize they had treated me the same as any other suspect and had no part in what happened earlier. "Anthony," a jailer called, opening the cell door. "Come with me, please." Crossing the threshold, I was surprised to see the girl from my car waiting with an older, distinguished-looking man. The jailer fidgeted as he led me to them. "Here he is, Judge. Your Honor, he's in fine condition. We've kept him safe, just as I said." The judge ignored the jailer and grabbed my chin, turning my head to examine the bruises on my face, lingering on the ugly mark on my cheek from Jeff's repeated hits with a phone book. The girl began taking photos with her phone. "Yes, I'd say he looks very good," she said. "How many of you did it take?" She looked at the bruises on my wrists from the handcuffs. "You must be proud of knocking up a handcuffed man. The Fuhrer would be impressed." The judge waved off both her and the jailer. "That's enough." Then he turned to me and said, "Come on, son. Let's get to work on taking these guys down." With that, the judge turned and walked out, and the girl and I followed him. We sat outside the police commissioner's office, watching men in suits move in and out, carrying papers and forms. I hadn't seen the judge since he'd gone in. "Would you like something to drink?" the administrative assistant asked. "Yes, watermelon juice," I replied. "Watermelon juice?" she repeated, surprised. "You said anything," I reminded her. "Well, we only have soda, tea, and coffee. No watermelon juice." I paused. "So when you said anything, you didn't really mean it? Only soda, tea, and coffee? That's misleading." The girl stepped in confidently. "We'll both have a soda. Any kind. Thanks." She nudged me toward a chair. "Relax, dude." "Are you an idiot or something?" I shot back. She raised an eyebrow. "I may not know what an idiot is, but I was just helping this lady be clearer. That's how wars got started back in 1607. "Wow, you're clueless," I interrupted, smirking. "But kinda cute. Now shut up. Don't you want to know what happened after the cops showed up at the gas station?" "I assume you're going to tell me," she replied, unfazed. "Isn't that why you're here at the police station?" She rolled her eyes, then extended a hand. "Anyway, I'm Dawn." I pointed to her ID sticker. "But your badge says New Dawn." "Technically, yes," she sighed. "My parents were into crystal energy, so they named me New Dawn. But you can just call me Dawn." "Fine. Can I call you Tony?" "Sure, if you want, but I probably won't answer since my name's Anthony," I replied. Dawn chuckled. "Okay, Anthony. Look, those 2 goons were after me because they thought I was shoplifting. Were you actually stealing?" Dawn gave me an innocent look. "Yeah, maybe." She shrugged. "It's not like a massive store like that would go broke over a few items. Do you know how little these corporations pay in taxes or how poorly they treat their employees? Not to mention child labor overseas." "What does that have to do with you stealing?" I asked. "This store's a franchise, so you were really stealing from a small family-owned business, not a big corporation." "Whatever," Dawn waved dismissively. "Aren't you even mad that the city's police force is full of corrupt flunkies living off our tax dollars, like those 2 Nazis who came after you?" "They're an outlier," I replied. Dawn looked confused. "An outlier?" In any large organization, public, private, or religious, you'll find about 11% who are high performers driving growth, 86% doing the minimum required, and 3% that break down into two groups. 2% are corrupt, willing to do anything to get ahead, and 1%, the dead weight, people who just take up space. I held up 2 fingers. I just happened to be first in the wrong place at the wrong time. 10 minutes earlier or later, I wouldn't have been involved. Second, I ran into 2 cops who don't represent the rest. Dawn started to speak, but I held up my hand. Look, the average police officer makes about the same as the average worker, not rich. They're there to enforce laws. If you disagree with the law, work to change it or the officials who make it. Don't blame the ones enforcing it. That's all I'll say on the topic. I looked at her. Please, go on. How did you end up here? Dawn shook her head. You're definitely one of a kind, Anthony. Anyway, after the other cops arrived, they were so busy with you that I managed to sneak away and hide at a nearby gas station. I saw those 2 officers go in, take the security tape, and threaten the store clerk. She held up her phone, grinning. They had no idea I was recording them the whole time. You mean they didn't identify themselves as police when they first attacked me? I asked. Exactly. I even got them on camera threatening the clerk. I noticed all the Meals on Wheels food in your car, so I called the organization and explained what happened. She smirked. Told them to send lawyers, tools, and money, just like the song. She glanced at the commissioner's door. Did you know the judge is on the Meals on Wheels board? I nodded. Yes, he's also the district's chief judge and the state's majority political leader. He spoke at my high school graduation. Dawn's eyes widened. Well, that explains a lot. Once I called, state patrol cars showed up. They took your car and brought me to the judge's office. He was furious when he saw the footage from my phone. It was like a royal court. People showed up in the middle of the night, some even in tuxedos. Then he called in more top officials, all to get you out. Dawn gently touched the bruise on my cheek. Those 2 cops planned to lose you in the system, delay the paperwork until your bruises healed. Then it would be their word against yours. Not to mention the false charges they'd filed. Resisting arrest, attack, possession of pills, the whole 9 yards. They even planted meth in your car. At that moment, the commissioner's assistant reappeared and motioned to me. Anthony, His Honor will see you now. In the end, both officers were fired and charged. The police commissioner was relieved to let them go, as this wasn't their first complaint. It turned out they were also on the shopping center's payroll while on duty for the department, sealing their fate. Other officers received reprimands, but the judge, commissioner, and district attorney all expressed their thanks to me. I was surprised they couldn't see that the other officers were just acting on what Mutt and Jeff had told them. According to their story, my gang and I had attacked them while they were trying to detain a suspect, supposedly to protect a stash house in my car. This whole situation taught me a lot about how quickly things can break down if trust among these new centurions is gone. The city police settled with me, offering a substantial payment. Raised to live simply, I'd never prioritized money, but I accepted, knowing that a jury wouldn't sympathize with a government agency that invented charges, arrested, and strike a disabled orphan. Yes, Asperger's qualifies as a disability, and I was a scholarship student delivering food to the elderly. About a week later, Dawn appeared at my door. Come on, Anthony, she said, glancing around my small apartment. I heard you got a check from the police. Let's take this money and go celebrate. I looked around my 1-room apartment. Dawn, I have a bed, a table, and a small dining area. Maybe it's a bit bare, but it's clean and functional, not exactly a dump. Fantastic, Dawn replied, irritated. You live in the Taj Mahal now. Invite me out somewhere nice. I deserve it. Today we're celebrating. I can't eat anything here, Dawn exclaimed, dropping the menu. We were at one of the city's best steakhouses, a classic place where my grandparents would take me on special holidays. They had the best beef, plus seasonal crabs and lobsters. I looked over my menu at her. What's wrong with the meat selection? She looked at me, disgusted. I'm a vegetarian, she said, pointing to the menu. Is it possible to eat anything here that hasn't suffered horribly? You're a vegetarian? I asked, and she nodded. Recalling my grandfather's words, I said, You know, Dawn, the original meaning of vegetarian was bad hunter. Dawn pointed at me. You don't get it. Nature didn't design us to eat hamburgers. I repeated something else my grandfather used to say. If nature didn't want us eating hamburgers, why did it make cows so easy to catch? I've never heard of anyone eating cheetah burgers. Dawn looked annoyed. Humans were never meant to eat meat. Our prehistoric ancestors ate almost entirely wild grains, fruits, and vegetables. I gave her a puzzled look. But you're not living in prehistoric times. If you were, you'd already be dead. The average lifespan of a cave woman was less than 20 years, with men living about 5 years longer. She waved me off. No one seems to understand that our ancient ancestors succeeded in hunting only 10% of the time. Hunting was risky. You could break a bone, sprain an ankle, or get injured, which meant a quick end of life without medical help. Without greens and tubers, they'd starve. Dawn, you're afraid of spiders, and I can't picture you eating termites. She grimaced. Anthony, that's disgusting. Clasping my hands, I continued. Cave people got most of their protein from insects. Termites were 38% protein, and one species in Venezuela, Sintermes aculeosus, is 64% protein. Termites are also rich in iron, calcium, and essential fatty acids. Dawn shook her head, waving the menu. People need to return to natural basics, not this industrial farming mess. Setting down my menu, I said, so we shouldn't use penicillin or antibiotics, perform surgeries without anesthetics, go back to when childbirth was the leading cause of end of life for women? No, Dawn said, but we should be more self-sufficient. She gestured to the other diners. I just worry about what everyone eats. I tried to understand her point, but she seemed so firm. Dawn, being worried about what others eat is like getting angry at someone eating a donut while you're on a diet. Dawn laughed, tossed the menu aside, and said, I'll get a salad, but desserts on me. At your place? Sure, I said, flipping through the menu to show her pictures of desserts. Today's dessert is homemade key lime pie with whipped cream. Can't think of anything better. Okay, fine, she said, smirking. Your dessert idea might just knock key lime pie. It only made sense that if Dawn was my girlfriend, she should live with me. But we couldn't share my small apartment, so I bought a larger place. The settlement from the police made it possible. Money was never my focus, but Dawn seemed to appreciate the things it could provide. I was studying math and accounting. I loved math, but my grandfather had said I needed a practical career, and accountants are always in demand. I never knew exactly what Dawn studied in college. She was always attending rallies and protests on campus, whether for gays, for metric native idiot rights, or stop animal testing of rubbers. I didn't follow them, but Dawn was passionate about every march and demonstration, and if it made her happy, that made me happy too. Determined to impress Dawn in bed, I dove into research on women's pleasure, reading articles, watching videos, and even interviewing a friend in the escort business. Purely informational. I'm a committed boyfriend now. Wow, Dawn said, blushing and falling back onto the bed. Where'd you get this idea? I put the toy back in the drawer and explained. A clerk at the Pleasure Palace recommended it. Even gave me a demonstration in the back. It's one of the top-rated ones. Dawn stared at me, then burst out laughing. You're probably the only guy who'd honestly call watching strangers' pleasure research. And I actually believe you. Dawn got pregnant, which threw me off. Not because of the baby itself, but because it disrupted my idea of an ideal relationship path. Dating, living together, marriage, then kids. It took 2 weeks to convince her, but she finally agreed, and we headed to the courthouse. That year was incredible for me. Dawn became my wife, and our daughter was born. With our daughter's arrival, Dawn and I had our first serious disagreement. She wanted a home birth. Anthony, I want her born here, in a place of love, next to where she'll sleep and eat, she argued. Dawn, you don't even like cooking, but you want to give birth in the kitchen? I replied, trying to stay rational. Our daughter's presence filled me with purpose, and I threw myself into learning about parenting. I consulted child psychologists and read everything I could. Dawn, however, grew tired of my constant suggestions, so I took on most of the parenting. She wasn't uninvolved, but she left the day-to-day things like zoo trips and concerts to me while staying active on campus. Years flew by. After earning my doctorate, I got recruited by a top hedge fund on Wall Street. They were looking for geniuses who could make 2 + 2 = 5. I enjoyed the work, a giant 3D puzzle where we could turn 2 + 2 into 9 under certain accounting tricks. Though the pay was high, money never motivated me. The thrill of solving complex problems did. They say a poor man wants to be rich, a rich man wants to be a king, and a king wants everything. I could see that Wall Street was just a rigged game, but if the money made Dawn and my daughter happy, then I was content too. It never crossed my mind that Dawn might cheat. Sure, we had late nights here and there, but she was busy with her activism, now focused on environmental issues like saving endangered animals. Anthony, she'd say, humans are the biggest threat to blue whales. True, I'd reply, But who else would hunt a blue whale? Pelicans with machine tools? Lions on jet skis? Then there was her approach to climate change. Dawn, I asked one day, don't you think it's odd to drive a Cadillac Escalade to a Save the Planet rally? She looked at me unfazed. It's a hybrid, very economical. The engine even shuts off when I'm stopped. I couldn't help but joke. My grandfather's car did that too. They called it stalling. Anthony, this is about reducing our carbon footprint, she insisted. I pulled up some facts on my laptop. That Escalade's carbon footprint, just from production alone, is massive. She threw her hands up. What should I drive then? A Volkswagen Jetta? It's safe, and the diesel version has better mileage than your SUV, I pointed out. But Dawn's spending never stopped. She'd come home with expensive designer dresses, always saying, "It looks so much better on." I thought, on fire, but kept it to myself. When our son was born, I was thrilled. He and his sister were both overjoyed. But then the housing bubble burst, and Dawn's lifestyle took a hit. Like most Americans, we didn't get any government help. Just the too-big-to-fail corporations did. We moved south, where I found work at a small bank. My salary dropped significantly, and our house was suddenly worth less than our mortgage. We left behind European trips, private schools, luxury cars, and even Starbucks. I was proud of how well the kids adapted. My daughter loved public school, and my son enjoyed having a big yard. Life at the small bank was easier, and the people were kind. But it was clear Dawn was unhappy. I hadn't realized how unhappy she was until I found her in our bedroom, packing a suitcase, 8 months after we'd moved. "Dawn," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Looks like you're going on a trip. I can't get a week off until I've worked a full year at the bank." Without pausing, Dawn pulled out another suitcase. "I'm heading to Manhattan to support the Occupy Wall Street protest." I blinked. "Dawn, we can't just leave right now. It's the middle of the school year, and I've just finished probation at work. Plus, we're tight on money." She kept folding clothes, unfazed. "I don't care. Occupy Wall Street needs me. I'll only be gone a few weeks." "But we need you here," I countered, desperation creeping into my voice. "What about the kids?" Dawn shot me a dismissive look. "Don't be such a child, Anthony. Our daughter can handle herself after school, and Janet from the bank has a nanny who can watch both her child and our son until you're home." "Dawn, you're not a soldier, and Occupy Wall Street isn't a war," I argued, trying to appeal to reason. She waved me off. "Anthony, they need me. It's my calling." I took a deep breath, trying a different tack. "Dawn, you're not going to lead a crowd. Studies show that group identity just activates pleasure centers, making people stop thinking critically." She snapped her suitcase shut, her expression hardening. "Stop arguing, Anthony. You won't win this." I met her gaze, my voice low. "Any spouse can win if they're willing to go far enough. That's called divorce." Her face softened, surprised. "We're not going to be part of the 50% that end in divorce." "Maybe not," I replied quietly. "But the other 50% end until death do us part." Dawn glanced down at the suitcase, hesitating. "Your car's tires won't even make it to New York. I was planning to replace them next paycheck," I pointed out. She shook her head, lifting her bags. "I'm not taking the car. I found a ride with someone I met online." I looked at her, incredulous. "And how exactly will you pay him? We barely have enough as it is." She shrugged. "We'll work something out." I sat there, speechless. I didn't even hear her leave. She didn't kiss the kids goodbye. When they asked, I told them she was at a rally up north, not sure when she'd be back. Soon the media picked up the story of a banker's wife joining Occupy Wall Street, dubbing her Aku Mama. Even in our small town, it stirred things up. "Dad," my son asked, "what's how? Son, how is a garden tool like a rake?" I answered, keeping it simple. My son looked confused. "Then why are kids at school saying mom's a garden rake?" My daughter came in. "They mean hoe, like a promiscuous." My son looked to me. "Dad, what's a hoe? And why are they calling mom that?" "Your mom's not a promiscuous, and that's a bad word," I said, sending him outside to play. After my son left, my daughter sat down, visibly upset. "Dad, you have to do something about mom. She's ruining my reputation at school." "Do you even know what people are saying about us?" she asked, frustration written on her face. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, we can't control what people say. And honestly, most people probably aren't even thinking about us." "Dad," she said, her voice heavy with teenage exasperation, "aren't you even a little bothered that mom is living with some random guy in a tent? It's all over the internet." "If it bothers you, just stay offline," I suggested. She shook her head. "It's not that easy. My friends keep sending me links, and it's gross. You have to do something." I leaned in, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'll take care of it, honey. After days of leaving messages, I finally reached Dawn. Anthony, I'm sorry for not calling sooner, she said, sounding harried. It's been chaos here. Dawn, save the apologies. You didn't even call back. I had to reach out. You don't understand what's happening here, Anthony, she replied defensively. Then maybe stop telling everyone about it, I said. Most people either don't care or are just relieved it's not their problem, she sighed. You really don't get it. There are thousands of us here, regular folks, even celebrities. Are there any other mothers who left their families to be there? I asked pointedly. Stop being so dramatic, she shot back. You act like toilet paper and aluminum foil mean more to me than my family. Dawn, toilet paper matters to a lot of people. And how are we your priority when you're living in a tent with some other guy? She let out an exasperated breath. Don't be ridiculous, Anthony. We're just sharing a tent. It's not like we're sleeping together. Really? I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice, because his blog post titled Occupying the Occumilf Cape suggests otherwise. Anthony, you actually believe everything you read online? He's just exaggerating, she protested. Dawn, I said, struggling to stay calm, when he describes the mole on your inner thigh in detail, it's hard to believe he's making it up. You need to come home. She paused, then conceded. Fine, I'll consider marriage counseling. But I'm not going to listen to some Bible-thumping counselor telling me to obey you and stay home. Dawn, I never asked for that. Just come home. I can't leave right now. This is too important. I checked my watch, my patience wearing thin. There's a midnight bus ticket waiting for you. If you're not on it, I'll be filing for divorce. Anthony, I'm a crucial part of this movement, she protested. Dawn, I replied coolly, don't confuse running in circles with progress. Be on the bus. Predictably, Dawn didn't get on the bus. A week later, she called, furious. Anthony, how could you file for divorce? And those photos in the paperwork? What if the kids saw them? I kept my voice steady. Now you're worried about the kids? They're the ones who showed me the photos. Your tent mate posted them online, and our daughter heard about it at school. I just printed them out. She softened a little. Look, Anthony, I'm sorry. I got caught up in the moment. How long was that moment? Dawn? I sent you 7 photos with dates from 7 different nights. There was a pause before she said, all right, maybe sleeping with him wasn't the smartest decision, but it was just one guy. I let out a disbelieving laugh. And what does the number of partners have to do with anything? Through the static of background noise, she continued. Put this in perspective, Anthony. Is my little affair worth losing everything? This doesn't have to be execution for our marriage. People go through these things. It could even make us stronger. Dawn, I replied, my patience gone. That logic makes as much sense as Yogi Berra saying, if you don't go to other people's funerals, they won't come to yours. I switched the phone to my other ear as she continued. Listen, I have a guy here with me whose father owns one of the biggest law firms in the state. He said if you keep pushing this divorce nonsense, you'll get sued. Then I heard a man's voice on the line. Hello? Can you hear me, Anthony? Yes, I hear you, I replied. Listen, buddy, you're handling this all wrong, he said. I work for a big law firm, and every day I see guys like you chewed up and spat out by the courts. If I represent your wife, you're done for. Do you even know who my father is? It was a bizarre conversation, but I responded, Sorry, man, I have no clue who your father is. Didn't your mother tell you? What? Hissed the voice on the line. I kept my tone calm. Maybe your mom had a lot of partners, and that's why it's hard to know. I don't know you, but I could try to help. Do you have any specific traits, like African American, Hispanic, or Asian? You idiot, he shouted back. My family's been here since this country was a colony. Why are you angry at me? I asked evenly. I'm just trying to help. And besides, it wasn't my mom who might have had multiple partners before I was born. Maybe you should check if she lived near a military or naval base at the time. The government keeps a DNA database. You could look there to see who she might have picked as a donor. I'm going to wipe the courthouse floor with you, he exploded. And then I heard a shuffling sound as Dawn must have taken the phone from him. Anthony, are you still there? She asked, her voice more restrained. Yes, Dawn, I'm here. Are you sure this is the guy you want representing you in our divorce? He seems pretty unstable, maybe because he doesn't know who his father is. Forget him, Anthony, and forget the divorce. Every couple has a slip-up at some point. Everyone does it. Nobody cares anymore. You're wrong, Dawn. According to a recent Gallup poll, having an affair is considered one of the most immoral acts. Out of 1,535 American adults, 91% believe infidelity is morally wrong, more than they object to human cloning, self-destruction, or polygamy. Only 9% think it's acceptable. Sure, we're more open to divorce, premarital sex, and children out of wedlock, but about 24 states still criminalize infidelity. Damn you, Anthony. Divorce is not an option, she snapped. Dawn, there are no right answers to wrong questions, I replied calmly. She spat back. Fine, Anthony. Want to bet? I'll ruin you for this. Remember, whoever came with a knife will die by the knife. I blinked, baffled. What does cutlery have to do with our divorce, Dawn? A stream of curse words came through the line before it went dead. In the end, Dawn cleaned me out during the divorce, and her lawyer truly wiped the floor with me. Apparently, our state is one of the few with lifelong alimony. Her lawyer used that, along with my previous income, to seize my retirement, home equity, savings, and any cash. But they were both surprised when I didn't care about any of that. I traded it all for sole custody of my children. As far as I saw it, Dawn may have won the battle, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Dawn's involvement in the Wall Street protests brought her some temporary fame. After our divorce, my daughter showed me a press release. Dawn had secured a book deal with a possible film adaptation. Her advance was substantial, which explained why she didn't push for alimony, though it didn't explain why she drained my accounts and pleaded poverty about child support. Dawn's fame quickly turned into small-town resentment toward me. I hadn't expected my colleagues or the town to react the way they did. Janet, the single mom and bank teller I shared a nanny with, explained it. You might not see it, Anthony, but there's still a lot of old-school machismo here from both men and women. Janet, what did they expect me to do? Touch my ex-wife? That's just not who I am. Janet patted my shoulder. I get it. None of this is your fault. Your ex, Dawn, isn't exactly stable. Honestly, with all the therapists, meds, and self-help, I bet 1/4 of women in this country are on some kind of mental health treatment. I thought about it. Wow, Janet, that means 75% of women are walking around with untreated mental illness. For some reason, Janet smacked my shoulder hard, muttering something about how we're all alike. Rubbing my shoulder, I continued, I really don't care what people think, except what does my personal life have to do with my job? We're in a bank, Anthony. People want to feel confident about where they keep their money and who they work with. Some folks think if you can't keep your own family together, how can you manage their finances? Maybe Janet had a point, but it didn't matter to me. My job was just a means to support my family. But as a result, several clients refused to work with me, and my manager bluntly told me that they didn't want weak people affecting business. So even though I was qualified, I was surprised when the bank manager came to my small office one day before closing. Tomorrow, you're in charge, he said. This is your responsibility. These are your employees. They're your responsibility. He looked up before closing the folder in his hand. Try not to let any of them leave or let you down. The next morning, an elderly guard let me in. I greeted my team as they arrived, and after a quick check around, I stepped into the men's room. When I came back out, I was stunned. 2 men in ski masks were in the lobby, with my employees lined up against the wall. Some were visibly shaking, and one woman had a large stain on her pants. One of the men held a tool to the head of the elderly guard. The other, holding what looked like an explosive device, yelled, "Are you the damn manager?" "Yes, I'm acting manager this morning," I replied, trying to recall the procedures for a robbery. "I assume you're here to take bank funds. Otherwise, you'll need to come back during regular hours when our full-time manager is here." The man grabbed me by my tie, yanking me toward him, shaking the bomb in my face. "Are you some kind of comedian?" he spat, tightening the tie and shoving me to the floor. Slowly, I got up, loosening the tie that had pinned me down. I hated wearing ties. They originated in Croatia in the Middle Ages, worn by men to show loyalty to their king. Why we still wore them now was beyond me. The robber yanked Janet out of the cashier line, wrapping an arm around her waist and holding the bomb close to her head. It looked like a grenade, though I couldn't tell if it was real or a fake. "Manager a hole," he shouted. "Are you listening? Give me all the money in the bank right now or I'll blow her head off." "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the storage room. "We haven't transferred the cash from storage yet, so it's all still there." "Then let's go," he ordered, pushing Janet forward. She stumbled, falling to the floor as he directed me to the back of the bank. We all ended up in the vault, just behind the safes, in a closed room with a barred door. The toolman left with a paper bag full of cash, while the bomber stayed at the vault door, blocking our exit. I could hear my employees' quiet sobs behind me. Once the first robber was clear, the bomber lifted the grenade with a smirk, then tossed it into the storage room. "Bye, suckers," he sneered before running off. I'd heard people say that time slows down in moments like this, but I'd never believed it. Time is constant. It doesn't speed up or slow down. Yet despite Einstein's theory, I experienced time dilation firsthand. In slow motion, the grenade rolled toward Janet's feet. I heard a cashier scream and saw another employee faint, falling slowly to the ground. This is your responsibility. These are your employees. You are responsible for them. Those words flashed through my mind as I dropped to my knees and lunged for the grenade, shoving Janet aside. I felt like I was moving through syrup, my hands appearing enormous like baseball mitts as I finally grabbed the grenade. I sprinted toward the vault exit, feeling as if I were running through quicksand. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the door and kicked it open, pulling it shut behind me. I knew that the century-old, cold-rolled steel vault door would protect everyone inside from the blast. Unfortunately, the door to the deposit room was shut, blocking my escape route. I noticed the display safe we used for demonstrations sitting open on the counter. Quickly, I shoved the grenade into the display safe and slammed it shut. Holding it with my left hand, I turned and wedged it into the open space in the wall among the bank's other safes. Suddenly, the world erupted into a blinding white light, and I was flung backward over the counter. When my vision cleared, a ringing filled my ears. Like thousands of bees were swarming around me. I realized I must be sitting on the ground because I saw Janet kneeling in front of me. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear anything. She reached out, loosened my tie, and wrapped it around my left arm. Looking up, I noticed a jagged hole where I'd placed the grenade. More employees gathered around, though I still couldn't hear them. I tried to stand, but my body felt like it weighed a ton. Janet gestured for me to stay down. Then she began unbuttoning her blouse. I briefly admired her firm C-cup chest in a white bra before she wrapped the blouse around my head. Her perfume filled my nose, a welcome change from the dust. I was trying to place the scent when I drifted into unconsciousness. When I woke, I realized I was in a hospital bed. My left arm and leg were both heavily bandaged. A man in a white coat stood beside me, jotting notes on a chart. "Welcome back, Rambo," he greeted me casually without even looking up. "I pulled a lot of fragments from your face and scalp, but it'll heal fine," he grinned. "Everything should be back to normal. Besides, chicks dig scars." He pointed his pen at me. "You also lost a couple of fingers and a thumb. The good news is the thumb's root was intact, so I reattached it. With rehab, you should regain about 80 to 85% mobility in that arm." He looked me over. "But I doubt you'll be playing the piano at Carnegie Hall." Confused, I replied, "Doc, I've never even played the piano, let alone at Carnegie Hall." He just shook his head. "Someone used your tie to stop the bleeding. Quick thinking, probably saved your life." With that, he hung my chart on the wall and walked out. I sensed movement on the other side of the bed and turned to see the bank manager standing there. "Anthony, you're one crazy son of a tool," he said, shaking his head. "I'd never have guessed you had it in you. The security footage caught the whole thing. It's like something out of a Bruce Willis movie." Running a hand over his thinning hair, he continued, "We're all really proud of you, and, well, sorry about the way things went down before. What with the divorce and all." After an awkward pause, he clapped his hands. "Of course, you're not the only one we're proud of." He pointed behind him and I saw Janet sitting nearby. The bank manager went on. "Janet slipped a couple of dye packs into the robber's bag. They didn't notice, and when the packs went off, dye covered them and their windshield. They lost control and crashed right into Creme Time Donut Shop." He chuckled. "Almost every cop in the county was there and they were promptly arrested." I'd tried to smile, but my face wouldn't cooperate. The manager looked over at Janet. "Janet, I have to get back to the grind. You'll keep an eye on Anthony, won't you?" Grabbing my shoulder, he added, "Take as much time as you need, Anthony. We've got you covered. We're all proud of you." After he left, Janet moved closer with a half smile. "Your kids are with mine and the nanny. Don't worry, they're having a blast, enjoying the fame of being the children of a local hero." She closed the door and came back to my bed, her half smile turning into a grin. "Die Hard, huh? More like Dumb and Dumber." She pointed at me, amused. "By the way, that was a flashbang, not a real grenade." In that moment, it all clicked. A standard M84 grenade, about 300 grams with a mix of magnesium and ammonium oxides. I shook my head, realizing. Janet shook hers too. If you hadn't gone full action hero, we'd have just ended up with a little ringing in our ears. I looked at my bandaged hand. True, I said softly. Putting it in the safe deposit box turned a harmless flashbang into an actual threat. I knew I hadn't meant to put anyone in danger, but I still felt foolish. I'm sorry, Janet. I didn't mean for things to go that way. She smiled. Forget about the bank. This is the best publicity they've had in years. Leaning down, she kissed me. Besides, you're my hero. I don't just take my top off for anyone. Janet wiped her lipstick from my lips. You deserve to make people regret how they treated you. I still have friends in the sheriff's department, and everyone believes you saved us from a real bomb. They won't confirm it wasn't, but they won't deny it either. I pointed at her with my good hand. But Janet, once this goes to court, the truth will come out, she laughed. Those two idiots already accepted a plea deal. They'll never admit it was a flashbang. Their reputation in prison is better if people think they were big-time criminals, she winked. You might even get to be Grand Marshal in this year's city parade. I shrugged. It didn't feel fair, but I didn't mind. Janet squeezed my thigh. Besides, you owe me a blouse, and the bank owes you a reward, and I plan on collecting. I never did get around to buying her that blouse. She even refused my offer to split the reward. My kids spent almost all their time at her place during my hospital stay, and she wouldn't accept a penny for expenses. Put it all away, Anthony, she said firmly when I tried to hand her some cash. 2 boys keep each other entertained, and your daughter is the girl I always wanted. I knew better than to argue, but I was already mentally figuring out how to set up a college fund for Janet's kids. As we rounded the corner to her house, I was surprised to see a stretch limo parked out front, and even more surprised to see my ex-wife, Dawn, standing on the porch with another woman. Janet muttered, "Looks like a village is missing its idiot." After helping me out of the car, Dawn rushed over. "Oh my God," she gasped, holding her arms open. "I came as soon as I heard. I barely managed to arrange a plane and limo." She hugged me tightly, but I barely responded. When she pulled back, I caught a flicker in her eyes as she looked me over. I knew I'd put on some weight, but unlike most divorced men, I hadn't thrown myself into an intense fitness routine. My job and lifestyle had left me a bit soft around the edges. "Well, Anthony," she said, gesturing to my stomach, "don't worry. I have a new diet plan to get you back in shape." I wasn't interested. The diet industry sells products with a 98% failure rate. Most people regain the weight within 5 years, I shrugged. Besides, I'm already in fighting shape. I'm too heavy to run away from a fight. Dawn laughed awkwardly. Very funny. A little exercise will give you a whole new healthy life. Exhausted, I replied. Dawn, if walking and cycling were all it took, mail carriers would live forever. Whales swim constantly, eat only fish and drink water, yet they're still fat. Rabbits run around and only live about 15 years. Turtles do nothing, and they live over a century. Now tell me again why I should exercise. Dawn glanced at Janet, who stood nearby. I see where you get your codependent attitude about avoiding exercise. Janet narrowed her eyes. There's plenty of evidence that women with a few extra pounds live longer than those who diet obsessively. The stern-looking woman next to Dawn stepped forward and extended a hand. Hello, Anthony. I'm Dawn's publicist. We're all very excited about this opportunity. Dawn jumped in, beaming. It's the perfect ending to my story. I nurse you back to health. We rebuild our family. It's a made-for-TV story. Lifetime is thrilled. We might even get a series. Dawn extended her hand to me. This could mean a lot of money and fame for us. No, I replied firmly, keeping my voice steady. What? Dawn and her publicist exclaimed together. No, I repeated. Which part of no didn't you understand? The publicist quickly tried to smooth things over. Anthony, I'm on your side. You need to listen to Dawn. I shook my head. There's always someone on your side that you'd rather have on the other side. Ignoring me, the publicist continued. I know you've been through a trauma and might not be thinking clearly. With your recent head injury and the shock of your split with Dawn, your judgment may be off. Think carefully. Opportunities like this don't come around twice. Janet took my arm and guided me toward her door. She turned to the publicist. In this case, it would be better if you called ahead. We wouldn't want to embarrass you by not answering the door. Dawn jumped in front of me. Anthony, stop. What are you doing? We belong together. You need me. You know you'll never find anyone like me again. I looked at her for a long moment. Dawn, that doesn't make sense. I don't even like you. Why would I want to find someone like you? She tried again. The future isn't what it used to be, Anthony. This will be a best-selling book, a national TV show. Do you really want to be cast as the villainous husband? Dawn, Even if you make a story out of this, no one, dog included, will care. Turning to Janet, Dawn tried a different approach. You're a Bible believer, right? Isn't there something in the Bible about forgiveness? Can't you help me here? Janet let go of my arm and faced Dawn and her publicist. I don't have a Bible verse, but I do have a line for Anthony. She pointed toward the street. Get out of my house. Dawn and her publicist stood there, stunned. You can't talk to me like that, Dawn stammered. Without looking back, Janet kept guiding me to the door. I'd shoot you both, but I don't want to waste bullets. She held up her phone. Uncle Bob, the city sheriff, is on my speed dial. Dawn and her publicist looked shocked. Janet continued, I have a loaded rifle, 3 acres of land, and a shovel. Don't mess with me or anyone I care about. Dawn's book quickly ended up in the clearance bin, and her movie bombed even worse. Her fame faded fast, though she still visited the kids occasionally, whenever it fit her schedule. Dawn's career could be tracked by the vehicles she arrived in. First, it was limos, then rental sedans, followed by taxis, and eventually shared rides in beat-up minivans. She still brought gifts and talked about projects in the works every visit, though the details became increasingly vague. The last time she visited, she was with an aging, unkempt actor who drove a rusty old Mercedes. My son caught a glimpse of her latest project, a low-budget reality show, on one of those obscure cable channels that catered to insomniacs. Janet couldn't resist a jab. Looks like Dawn has a case of vapidus lucatus, she quipped. What's that? I asked, genuinely curious. Janet grinned. It's a condition where people chase fame without real accomplishments. They end up on obscure cable channels, staying obscure, and sometimes appear in ads for reverse mortgages. The kids found it hilarious, though I wasn't sure vapidus lucatus was real. Still, Janet's dry humor brought us all a good laugh. Over time, Janet and I grew closer. I was pleasantly surprised to meet her brother and discover he was also on the spectrum, which explained her understanding and patience. Eventually, we began dating. It felt like the natural next step. We had a lot in common, and merging our families allowed us to live comfortably. My kids adored Janet, and so did I. One day, I was even asked to ride on the main float in the town's Founders Day parade. Reflecting on everything, I realized an important truth. People often think you need money to be rich, but true wealth isn't about money. It's about who you have in your life, not what you own. Reflecting on those years, I find myself grateful for the unexpected twists that defined my life. From a rocky childhood of misunderstood intentions to a series of intense, often surreal encounters, each challenge brought its own lessons. In my earlier years, I had always felt separate, as if I were navigating a world that rarely fit my understanding. Yet through each encounter, from confrontations in the bank to standoffs in personal relationships, I've come to appreciate the strength and resilience that come with living authentically, Asperger's quirks and all. After the chaos, there was Janet. Her steady presence grounded me, bringing warmth and acceptance I never anticipated. The calm after the storm, she reminded me that genuine connections are possible, even for someone like me who has always viewed the world a bit differently. We shared more than laughs. She understood my struggles and saw beyond my straightforward, literal responses, connecting with the deeper, compassionate side I rarely allowed others to see. Her patience and humor didn't just brighten my life. They became a lifeline as I rebuilt. The kids, too, became a source of pride and purpose. Watching them thrive reminded me of the value in every little moment, the subtle joys often overlooked. We built a routine in a new town, where life felt simpler, more genuine. With each passing day, I saw my role as their father not merely as a duty, but as a privilege, an opportunity to help them find the balance between logic and emotion, between stability and spontaneity, that took me decades to uncover. Now, life is far from perfect, but it is richer than I ever imagined. I find joy in the everyday, small conversations, family dinners, even the occasional parade float in a town that has come to see me as one of its own. Money and fame, once tempting goals, have little appeal. True wealth, I've realized, is woven from the love and acceptance of those who stay by your side through the ups and downs, the ones who see your unique path and choose to walk alongside you.
My wife asked for separation, citing that I was a man-child. I admit, I would rather play video games than do chores, I was very forgetful about everything. I wasn't that involved with our kids. Her nagging made me more stressed out. She finally had enough and kicked me out. I just felt a sense of relief. No more nagging, no more stress. Nothing. When I got to my apartment, I cleaned everything. I stopped forgetting things. It made sense to wash dishes now, and it made sense to make my bed. I felt the urge to clean. It was like I was a different man. I was more involved with my kids, and it made sense now to pack lunch for them, to read them bedtime stories. Whereas in our marriage, I just felt burdened. I still played video, but it was not like the addiction I used to have. It's like my problems and all the mental blocks just ended overnight. I looked online for more advice on life after divorce and was told to go to the gym. I did it once. The gym is not for me. I do some jumping jacks and stuff for 15 minutes a day and eat healthy. I have lost 30 pounds in 4 months. I've been dipping my feet in dating too, and I have, or had, a kind of friends with benefits situationship. I'm taking things casual for now. All in all, my life is going on an upward trajectory. I've realized that I'm not a man-child, more so my wife is a bad partner, and that's why I used to seek comfort in video games and felt no motivation in life. When I separated from her, I became better almost instantly. My wife has seen my change and wants to get back together. I was wishy-washy in rejecting her at first, but I've made up my mind now and told her that she's better off without me, which is actually true. She wasn't wrong in leaving me, for her and me. She will not take that for a reason. She insists that she'll decide what's good for her and that I should return. I've been very nice while rejecting her offer. It's not like I'm being an idiot to her. She just wouldn't let it go. Why is she taking it all on her ego? She asked me why, and I told her she was truly better off without me. She found out about my friend with benefits, most likely because I posted a pic of us hiking together and contacted her to say that I'm a married man with kids and she shouldn't become a homewrecker. My friend with benefits told me that she doesn't want drama in her life and ended things with me, which sucks pretty bad. I don't know why my wife is being like that. I've been very nice but firm with her, and I'm not giving her any mixed signals. She just won't let it go. She's so determined to cause me trouble. Am I the idiot for not wanting to get back to my wife after separation? You are the idiot, dude. You aren't being honest with her. You're only telling her that she's better off without you. And even if you believe that's true, it isn't why you don't want to get back together with her. It is sending her mixed messages, because when she sees you making changes she'd been asking you to make, she probably feels hopeful that you guys can move forward. She doesn't have the insight because you haven't communicated that with her. Tell her that you also feel like you are a better version of yourself when you're not in that marriage. Now is your chance to not be a man-child for real. Grow up. Tell her the truth. Jesus, I can see why she kicked him out. The fact that he thinks he's all grown up now is honestly just absurd. He's happier single because he cleans for himself, etc. While he lived there, it was all about him too. Now he doesn't want to be the bad guy by being honest. Man-child has no guts at all, and he doesn't want to leave his wife. He wants her to divorce him so he can play the victim. Yeah, it was all the wife's fault for nagging. Oh my God, she was nagging, when at the very beginning, he admitted he absolutely was a man-child. It wasn't until he actually had to clean up after himself, but to him, it just made sense. No, jerk, you lost your intimacy maid. No one's gonna do it unless you get up off your lazy butt, put the controller down, and actually do it yourself. The only thing he's done is prove that he could have been helping her that whole time and chose not to. And he's been blaming her for everything no matter what, because he never actually grew up. I realized my wife is a bad partner. Man, she wasn't a bad partner. She was your crutch. She carried the whole family on her back while you played video games. She is better off without you. I had 2 weekends a month of custody of my kids. Not that I didn't fight for equal custody, but I lost. I decided to give up custody of my kids because I was bleeding money. I was paying a lot of money on rent, and coupled with child support, It was not sustainable for me in the long run. I gave up the rest of the physical custody. It did increase my child support by 10%, but that was way below what I was paying for rent. I moved to my parents' basement to save some money. That's when the tide started turning in my favor. One of my coworkers, let's call him Richard, wanted a cheap place to rent, and I convinced my parents to let him rent their basement and let me stay in my childhood bedroom, aka a new gym room. It wasn't easy and a lot to ask, but I was able to show a somewhat concrete financial plan. For 2 years, Richard, now my best friend, rented my parents' basement, and I lived with my parents in my old room. My parents sacrificed to let me stay for 2 years. I saved a lot of money by not spending on anything other than food. I didn't buy any clothes, not even underwear, never went on a vacation, and never went anywhere that would require any kind of money. I was not able to qualify for a mortgage because of child support obligation, so I took my savings and my parents combined it with rent money from my coworker to put a down payment on a house. I've lived in that house for 6 years now. I rent it from my parents because they take normal rent from me and pay the mortgage, and the rest goes into a fund for me. I got a roommate too, so technically, I live for free. This has helped me to save a lot of money. My parents are still renting their basement, as they felt lonely after Richard and I left. Richard also bought a house in my neighborhood. All in all, life was difficult, but now it's good. I've saved a lot of money, and I'm planning a comfortable retirement. So after 6 years, I finally have discretionary money to spend. So I took a week off from work last year and traveled with my girlfriend, and I flaunted it on social media. My ex-wife suddenly started texting me that I was a deadbeat. I never missed a child support payment, and selfish, as I should have taken the kids on vacation. When I gave up the custody, I would have to beg her to let me talk to my kids. I remember the day when she asked for more money and refused to let me talk to my kids if I didn't give it to her. That was the last day I ever contacted her or my kids, so I didn't think she would even let me take the kids on vacation. I wrote about my journey to show that it wasn't easy to reach the place I am now, but I made it by sacrifice on my part and my parents' part. I have a house and money that I earned for myself. I should be able to flaunt it and enjoy it as I please. Am I the idiot? You are the idiot. You gave up custody. She won't let me talk to my kids is like the deadbeat dad motto. If you kept custody like a decent person, she legally could not keep you from them. But you gave up custody and blamed her for your predicament. Yeah, this doesn't even make sense. What was the point of fighting for custody if you were just going to throw away your time anyway? If you were given every other weekend, you had secured access to your kids. It makes no sense for you to have thrown that away. Have you saved any money towards your kids' future? Or is that based on your ex letting you see them? And while congratulations on rebuilding your life, are you suspiciously vague as to why you split with your ex? And it's Richard's money and your parents' generosity that rebuilt you, not your hard work. Not the idiot for going on holiday and posting it on social media, as that was the question. You are, however, a massive idiot for abandoning your kids. You had custody for 2 weekends per month, which you gave up. Why couldn't you continue seeing your kids while living with your parents? Your ex is right. You are a deadbeat father. Even though you pay your child support every month, you chose not to contact your kids for 6 years. The worst part, you're so darn proud of this. I really hope your ex is remarried and they call her husband dad. I, 30 female, lost my husband 4 years ago. We share 2 children. Our son is a tween and our daughter is a young grammar schooler. Since my husband's death, I've focused on myself and my children, and I have no interest in dating or finding another husband. My mom had experience with this when my sister and I were children, young grammar schoolers. We lost our dad, and our mom remarried 15 months later. At the time, she told us we were getting a new dad. Once her husband arrived, there was no expectation and pressure to call him dad, and our mom took down all photos of dad. We, my sister and I, took some photos of dad and hid them with our friends out of fear mom would destroy or throw them all away. She didn't, but the ones we didn't take were locked in storage and have never seen the light of day. My sister asked for them occasionally and was told she didn't need them. Our dad's stuff is likely in there too, if they weren't tossed into the garbage. It caused a lot of strain between us and our mom. For the last 2 years, my mom has been dropping hints that I should get back out there, and I always said that I didn't want to, or I would ignore it. Then a couple of months ago, she told me I needed to get my kids a dad before it was too late, that I needed a husband. I told her they have a dad who doesn't need replacing. She dropped it for another few weeks, but then she brought it up to me last week. She told me the kids need a dad, and I need a husband around, or I'll be alone and lonely for the rest of my life. She told me I couldn't remain dedicated to being my husband's wife for the rest of my life. She said I'm too young, and the kids are too young to never get another dad. I told her I don't want another husband, and my kids don't need another dad. She asked me where would I be if she had that mindset and I didn't have a dad. I told her I lost my dad at 6 and miss him every day, and I never had another one. Things escalated from there, and she asked me how I could say that when her husband had been my dad for 24 years. I told her he never has been and never will be, and just because she replaced my dad doesn't mean I want to replace my husband. Mom was furious and told me that wasn't fair and that I should understand her better. I told her I understood her even less after losing my husband because I would never remove all traces of him from the home, and I would never deny my kids his things the way she did. I would never force my kids to call someone else dad, and I told her I couldn't even imagine wanting to find them someone else to call dad. I told her they had an amazing dad, and he's still their dad, just the way mine will always be my dad. She called me spiteful and selfish, and she went to my sister for backup, but she told her she feels the same way. My aunt, who's my mom's sister, told me I shouldn't have said what I did, and accusing her of replacing my dad instead of just seeing that she wanted us happy is cruel, and I'm old enough that I should understand. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Off the top, I'm sorry for your loss, and I hope your kids keep getting to know their dad through your and other loved ones' memories of him. There is some validity in your mom saying you shouldn't have to feel like you need to live as your husband's widow forever. You can treasure that love and also find new love. But your mom is majorly overstepping. Your kids don't need a father. They need role models in their lives, and you don't need to be married to that person for them to be a positive influence. It's clear your mom was scared to be alone, but her fear had a profound impact on you that wasn't positive, and she's old enough to understand that her choices have consequences. Honey, you mustn't repeat your mother's mistakes to validate her feelings. Your mom should have never tried to replace your dad. The way she handled your childhood was unhealthy for you and for her. It sounds like you're just now getting a chance to get these pent-up feelings out, and your mom's probably very defensive because she's either in denial about how much your actions mess with you or too upset to understand how much your actions mess with you. It's good that you were able to get it out there. My friend has been married for a year now to her firefighter husband. She's the only one in the friend group that is married. I usually host dinners every couple of months, and we'll do a late one for the holidays on Friday. I usually invite him, but money's gotten tight due to the holidays, and he eats so much. I understand why, but it always results in me doubling the recipes or running out of food. So this time I told everyone that I just wanted to do a girls' night. This means my friend's husband is not invited. If he isn't there, there's enough food for everyone without the double recipes. She called me up asking why I was doing a girls' night. I told her the truth that I couldn't afford to make double for dinner, and her husband ate a lot. She called me a jagoff, and now she's telling my friends why. Everyone is split, and no one offers to help with the food bill. So, am I the idiot? Is he insisting on more food? You also didn't need to tell her the real reason if you didn't want to, and you've probably made him feel crappy. To be honest, if money is tight, maybe don't host dinners or ask everyone to bring a dish. Then you have to pay for less, and they can double up their recipe. You are the idiot, and should probably just have told the group it's getting expensive. You are happy to host, but bringing dishes and contributing to the cost would help instead of singling out one person and making them feel guilty for eating. Still, I understand that times are tough and money's tight for everyone, so it can be really difficult, so I do feel for you in that sense. I offered the group the option to Venmo me some money or change it to a potluck. They don't agree. He eats 2 to 3 servings. He eats more than everyone else, so if I don't double it, some of the girls will be hungry if he gets his fill, since he'll eat it all. Another option is he's still hungry, which seems to be a no, since that happened the first time, and everyone was upset. He sounds like an extremely rude dinner guest. I wouldn't invite him to my home either. When I go spend time with friends who are tight on funds, I make sure to bring my own food or expect to pay for pizza or something. I'd never expect them to fund my meals, particularly if I knew I was a big eater. You are not the idiot. And friend and husband should have chipped in with a big side dish of something and a bottle of wine. How do 2 people think that they're regularly going to dinner at someone's house and not contributing? Husband has no manners, but OP let it go on for too long. The husband shouldn't have been there to begin with. You did nothing wrong in arranging a smaller party to manage cost. Your friend just sounds entitled and ridiculous. Oh man, I had a weekend guest once. I made this nice pot roast for dinner and was going to serve the leftovers for lunch the next day. It seemed reasonable since it was the 3 of us and a baby, and he wasn't a bodybuilder or anything, large framed but an IT guy. He kept saying how good the meal was, and then he ate half of the pot roast in one sitting, you guys. I had to scramble to figure out lunch, and we're low-budget farm people who make everything from scratch. And I have to say, it was a factor in not going out of my way to invite him again. He's still a good friend, but not every friend is a good house guest. I am very, very frustrated. My son has been married to my daughter-in-law for 3 years now. I've always made extra dishes that didn't include meat to accommodate her. No matter how much it was a pain to do, I always made sure she had options to eat when I hosted, or she was over. She's a vegetarian and at one point tried to go vegan. My son and she never hosted due to living in a small apartment, but that changed as they just bought a home. They're having dinner this week, and I called her to remind her that I'm allergic to nuts. She then informed me that she didn't have time and told me to bring my own food. She told me that she cooks with a lot of different nuts and can't adjust her menu. This is where I might be the jerk. I told her I wouldn't be going, and neither would my husband. I've accommodated her for years, and I've never made her bring her food. This started an argument where she thought I was being unreasonable. My husband is on my side, but she and my son are very upset. Not the idiot. Allergies are not food critiques. You can die from a bad reaction. The fact you were accommodating her dietary request and then she's completely dismissive of your actual needs is absurd. Definitely don't go to dinner when the chef is blasé about trying to kill you. You accommodated her, even when her accommodations weren't necessary, and dependent on the nut allergy, you could just die being around them. The utter disregard for someone's safety is wild to me. Nuts aren't even used as the main ingredients in most foods, so not subbing out is wild to me. The idea that she can't change the menu because of a significant allergy is giving off the vibe that she did this intentionally.
I took revenge after my wife cheated, and she ended up hospitalized with an STD from her affair partner. Life can mess up your plans, which is why I don't bother planning anymore. I used to be big on planning before my divorce. At work, I'd plan for all possible emergencies in my department. I had backup plans ready in case the main ones didn't work. Today, I got a call saying I needed to see my ex-wife. I hadn't seen her in over a year and wasn't keen on it, but since my daughter asked, I had to go. My daughter, Sammy, was really persistent, so I drove back to town. It took me almost an hour to get through the busy freeways to the city hospital where Sammy had taken her mom. I parked and hoped I wouldn't be there long. At the information desk, I learned my ex-wife, Erica, had been in the hospital for 2 days. A nurse took me to her room but said she was still asleep. "What's wrong with her?" I asked. Your wife, she started. I interrupted, saying, ex-wife, very ex-wife, with a smile. The nurse smiled back but then looked serious. Dad, seriously? You aren't flirting with the nurse while Mom's in the hospital, are you? Said my daughter behind me. Of course not, Sammy, I said. If I were flirting seriously, I would have at least asked. I glanced at the nurse. Bonnie, she said. Ooh, that name suits you, I said. My daughter then pushed me into her mom's room, breaking our smiley moment. The room had 4 beds and was the most depressing place I'd been in, whether in a hospital or anywhere else. This room is terrible, huh? She said. I shrugged. Dad, she's here because she doesn't have health insurance. Darren can't add her to our plan. The only person who could is... Her voice trailed off. Sammy, honey, I love you more than anyone. I'd do almost anything for you, but you've got to get that your mom and I are divorced. I did everything the judge said, but not everything she wanted, Sammy said softly. We stood by the bed looking at the sleeping woman. She never wanted a divorce, you know, Sammy said quietly. She still loves you, even now. People in hell want ice water, I said coldly, but they're down there for what they did. Your mom and I are divorced because of what she did when we were married. I know what she did, Sammy said. I was there, but I can't help but feel you two still belong together. She loves you so much, Dad. Look at her, she's falling apart. Some people don't age well, I said coldly. Maybe she needs to take care of herself. She needs her husband, Sammy spat. She needs love and care. That's why she's wasting away. You woke me for this? I said mockingly. Who's her husband? Do you have any compassion? Sammy asked. You don't know compassion, I snapped. I put up with her for years, gave her chances, but she couldn't let go. Dad, don't you want someone to settle down with and enjoy life for good? Been there, done that, I said bitterly. Thought I had that person. Loved her enough to put my pride aside and try to fix things, even after I found out what she was doing. But she couldn't let it go. Some women can love 2 men at once, Samantha said. And some men can handle that, I replied. But not me. Why am I here anyway? I've been here since we brought her, Samantha said. I needed a break to go home, shower, change, and to see my husband. Darren sat with her yesterday, but he doesn't like Mom. He used to, until I stopped. 3 family is almost destroyed because of 2 messed up people, I said. Maybe they belong together. Don't you have any compassion? Samantha asked. Sometimes I can't find my heart, I snapped. She tore it out. Didn't you already get your revenge? Samantha asked. You've crushed her spirit. What more do you want? I didn't get revenge, I said. I walked away. I still don't understand, Samantha said. You're not the type to walk away. There's so much I don't get in these 2 years since the divorce. Like what? I asked. We split everything except the house. It just didn't make sense, she said. Mom didn't want any of that stuff. She just wanted you, and it just seemed like you guys should have had way more money than you actually did. Your mom's lawyer went over all of our finances. I shrugged. So Dad, then why are you driving a customized Mustang that my husband claims cost at least $50,000 when Mom can't even afford a car, she asked. Maybe my credit is better, I said. Anyway, I'll sit here and play games on my iPad while she sleeps for a few hours. I'll give you a break, honey. Hopefully she won't wake up. If she does, I'll call you immediately. What's wrong with her anyway, Dad? Mom has been diagnosed with severe depression symptoms. She's actually on medication for it. For some reason, she took all of her pills at once. We had to have her stomach pumped. She also hasn't been eating the way she should, and she's been drinking too much alcohol. She's exhausted and dehydrated, and we still don't know whether she took all of the pills by accident or if she was trying something, said Sammy. So the chances are she probably won't even wake up, right? I asked, smiling. Right, said Sammy. But Dad, if she does, please be nice to her for me, okay? Okay, Sammy, I said. My daughter kissed me on the cheek and left the room. I sat down in the chair next to the bed and got out my iPad. I started out opening the book I was reading, but quickly lost track of the book as my thoughts wandered back to 2 years ago when this had all started. Ed, we do strange things for our kids. When Sammy was little, she liked making odd mixes of candy. I love her so much, so I'd eat whatever she made and say it was great. Once she invited us over for dinner. It was nice, but Samantha still couldn't cook. The roast was super dry. Darren kept refilling my drink, probably knowing the roast wasn't good. Luckily, I don't drink much, or I'd have been drunk. It was nice spending time with family. I hung out with Samantha's son, John, named after me. He was adorable and could do no wrong in my eyes. The highlight was when Sam and Darren told us she was pregnant again. Darren, what are you doing to my daughter? I joked. We discussed the usual topics when our kids are expecting. We all like the name Elizabeth if it's a girl, after Darren's mom. I suggested Peter for a boy, after Darren's dad, which he liked. Then things took a turn. You already have a grandkid named after you, Erica said. Let someone else pick this time. What do you have in mind? I teased. Let me guess. Erica for a girl, Eric for a boy. Well, actually, I was thinking Randall, she said. We could call him Randy. Randall James Dillon sounds nice. The mood changed suddenly. Samantha looked at me. I'm not sure about that, she said. I prefer Dad's suggestion, don't you, Darren? Darren hadn't looked at me yet. He was still smiling, thinking about his dad being happy with a grandkid named after him. He just nodded. Erica reached for my hand, but I pulled away sharply. Samantha hadn't noticed my reaction. What do you think, Dad? She asked. In a cold tone, I replied, I think naming him that would be as big a mistake as the one your mother just made. Have you ever seen one of those scenes in the movies or on TV where everyone is at a party having a good time? There are people dancing, music playing, people are eating and drinking and laughing everywhere. Then someone does something really stupid, and everything just stops, and every head turns towards them. Usually the music stops and you hear a sound like the needle scratching on an old record at the same time. Well, it was that kind of moment for what seemed like an hour, but was probably no more than a few seconds. No one said anything. Then Darren broke the silence in a diplomatic way. He looked at his watch and said, Wow, I really have to get to bed. I've got an early meeting tomorrow. Thanks for a great evening. Darren, I said, I love you, Sammy. Then I got up and headed for the door. As I was opening the door, Samantha called me. Dad, what is wrong with you? She asked. Aren't you forgetting something? Well, come on over here and hug me, Sammy, I said. I have to get out of here, or I can't even breathe. I was talking about Mom, she smirked. I thought you didn't drink. Darren, just what have you been filling my father's glass with all night? It's Pepsi, sweetheart, I said, although right now, I could use some liquor. What is wrong with you, John? Asked Erica, coming over to me. She reached out for me again, and this time I moved away from her so obviously that everyone saw it. We're going to talk about this when we get home, honey, she said. We aren't doing anything, I snapped. I'm going back to my house. I have no idea what you're doing or where you're going, but it's not with me. Wait a minute, Dad, said Samantha. You're mad at Mom because she didn't like the name you came up with? Erica's eyes widened then because she suddenly knew that I knew. No, honey, I said. I'm not mad or angry at all. I've just finally come to my senses. There are times when the people who love you do things to hurt you, and you just let it go. There are times when you suffer in silence because you think that if you just get past this one little thing, you can go on, and things will be better in the end. But then something happens that lets you know that you've suffered and made allowances for nothing. Sometimes some things just can't be let go of. Everyone in the room was looking at me, except Erica. She already knew what I was talking about. Dad, you're not making any sense, said Samantha. Sammy, your mother wants you to name my grandson after the man she's been in love with for the past 15 years or so. The guy she had an affair with. She found out a couple of days ago that he recently died. She's trying to let his memory live on in my grandson. Both Samantha and Darren looked at Erica, who had fallen to the floor and was silently sobbing. I'm so sorry, John, she said. It's over. It's been over for more than 5 years. I've been trying to be the best wife possible to you. Why did it end, Erica? I asked. Because I felt so guilty, she said. I knew that what I was doing was wrong, so I ended it. Can't we talk about this? In the first place, it wasn't an affair. We only got together once a year, and we didn't even always have Z. And after I came home, you and I always had the best Z we've ever had. It's been over for a long time. I love you, John. We needed to talk about this. You don't understand this. It's not as bad as it seems. It's worse than you think it is, Erica, I snapped. Maybe when the divorce is over, you'll tell someone the truth, but I'm sick of you lying. What do you mean? She said. I admitted it, Erica. If it was up to your lying ass, you'd still be seeing him, I said. I told you I ended it, she snapped. And you're lying again, I said. I ended it. You what? She asked. I went to Boston and met him 5 years ago, I said. I beat the crap out of him. He was in the hospital before your pitiful cheating witch was off of the plane. I took his phone, and I got all of your texts. I'll probably be using them as evidence. I also told him who I was and let him know that the next time he came anywhere near you would be his last day on the planet. I told him that I'd also let his wife know about the two of you. I told him that if he ever tried to contact you for any reason, even just plain friendship, I'd be back. So you didn't end anything, Erica, I said. I did, John. I'm sorry, she said. I was wrong. I was confused. It was a mistake. I'm sorry too, Erica, I said. I was wrong too. I was confused too. I made a mistake too. I was wrong to try to save this messed up marriage. I did it for Sammy though. I didn't want her to have to deal with us splitting up until she was out on her own. I was confused too. You see, I thought that maybe in time, since I loved you so much, that we could get past this. I made a mistake. Instead of ending this sham then, I really tried to make it work, but at least you were right, honey. You did end something. From the first second that you uttered his name tonight, you ended our marriage. I walked right out of the house, got into my car, and drove away. I spent a long time that night just driving around. The roar of my Mustang's engine and the thrill of speeding through the darkness of the moonlit night took away some of my pain. I turned off my phone so I wouldn't be disturbed. I really wasn't as upset as it seemed. I'd known about what she'd done for over 5 years, and for that whole time, I'd been preparing for the divorce in more ways than one. Erica was probably more shocked by tonight than I was. First, because she had no idea that I knew about her affair, and secondly, because she really only found out that night why it had ended. She'd flown to Boston for a conference, the same one she went to every year. She got a room in the hotel she always stayed in. The conference was a one-day seminar that she always told me was 2 days long. After the conference ended, she had dinner with Randall. They sat there in the restaurant talking to each other until the restaurant closed. She even mentioned me a couple of times. Then when the restaurant closed, they exchanged a very nice kiss and she went back to her room. Randall went out to the parking lot in his car to drive home. As Randy got to his car, I was sitting on the hood. "Hey, that's my car," he said. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's wrong for people to bother things that don't belong to them, isn't it, Randy?" "I agree totally," he said. "Let's not talk about hubcaps, Randy. Let's talk about Mary, your wife, who right now is waiting for you at your house on Sycamore Street. It's probably too late for me to go over there to talk to her right now. I should probably wait until tomorrow to visit her." "I'm calling the police," said Randy. I pulled out my phone and tried to hand it to him. "Randy, you can call the police anytime you want. It'll be my word against yours, and either way you'll lose because somehow in all of it, the fact that you've been spending time with my wife, Erica, while your own faithful little wife was waiting at home for you, will come out." Randy's whole face went pale. "I'm not the sharing type of guy, Randy," I said. "I think you've made a mistake," he said. "I do know Erica, but we haven't spent any time together." He looked at me and saw how serious my face was. Apparently it worked. When I got back home, Erica was her usual after the conference self. She tried to kill me with lovemaking, but I just didn't go for it. Usually after she came back from the conference, we'd go off on vacation somewhere together. That year, I pretended to be too busy to get away. As hard as I tried to put the whole thing behind me, I couldn't. A big part of my brain was in Judas Priest mode. Okay, most of you don't know what I'm talking about. There's a heavy metal band called Judas Priest. Arguably their best album was the one called Screaming for Vengeance, and that was how I felt. Try as I might, I couldn't calm down. I wanted blood. I wanted someone to pay for my pain. If misery loves company, I wanted someone to be miserable with me, and I picked Randy. Through some business connections I had, I got Randy fired. I didn't go all snidely whiplash and let him know that it was me who did it. It was enough that I knew. I felt great about it. I had no regrets about it at all. It gave me the same warm glow that I once got when I did something nice for Erica. To do something evil to Randy, I've spent the last 5 years of my life ruining his. At the same time, I was sure that divorce for Erica and me was inevitable. Why didn't I confront her and file? Because despite what she'd done, I still loved her in my heart. I really wanted to believe her and give her another chance, but my head, just as in my job, told me to be prepared for anything. I told Erica that we were under a raise freeze at work when I actually got a raise. A few months later, the promotion I'd been working for the past 10 years was finally mine. I didn't tell Erica. My salary nearly doubled. I diverted most of the new income into accounts that she knew nothing about. 2 years later, I got another promotion and another raise. Again, I told Erica nothing about what was going on. The reason behind all of this deception was that in the case of our divorce, she'd have no idea about my actual income. She'd really believe that I was still making 40 grand a year, so that's what our divorce would be based on. My boss had been absolutely raped in his divorce, so he saw no problems in helping me. Officially on the books, I was listed as a mid-level manager. No one outside of the company ever even asked why all the other managers deferred and reported to me. It just seemed like the way our company ran. 3/4 of my actual salary was regularly paid to another company that on the surface looked like one of our vendors. I was not one of that company's officers, nor did I own it. All of the officers of that company were fishing buddies of mine. In exchange for the usage of their names, I took them fishing once or twice a year. They were all listed as volunteers, so there were no salary or tax implications for them. The money from that company went directly into my offshore account, so there was no tracing it after that. There were a couple of times that I did withdraw some of the money. Once was after Samantha and Darren got married. I put a large down payment on their house to start them out in their marriage without a lot of financial stress. I didn't buy the house for them outright, but I put enough down that their regular mortgage payments were under $100 a month. The other time was to buy Sam and Darren a second car since they both worked, and their jobs weren't in the same part of town. It just made things easier for them. Again, even in giving the kids their gifts, I had to be careful. The way I managed to give them their house and the second car actually worked in my favor and allowed me to give Erica even less money. The money for their house supposedly came from me pulling it out of my retirement package. That meant that in the case of a divorce, I'd have next to nothing in my retirement account for Erica to get her greedy, cheating hands-on. To get the money for the car, I ostensibly took out a loan, which even further lowered my disposable income, so I'd be able to give Erica even less. One of the great things about my situation was that Randall worked in manufacturing. He specialized in inspecting castings. My company was also manufacturing-based. We owned a lot of direct-to-factory manufacturing concerns all across the country. I had a PI friend who lived in Boston. I had him regularly check on Randy. Every time he got a job, I'd talk to one of our account execs. If we had an account with the company Randy worked for, one of my friends had lunch with someone who worked there, and Randy got fired. If we didn't have an account with Randy's new company, we got one, then Randy got fired. I kept a spreadsheet on my computer that was dedicated to keeping track of Randy and all of his misfortunes. Some of them I didn't even cause. After a while, Randy's reputation in the manufacturing community was so bad that he couldn't even interview for a job. Just before Randy passed, his last jobs were in landscaping or day labor. His misfortune had also taken its toll on Randy's marriage. His wife had gone back to work to help support the family. I never touched her or her career because I had nothing against her. I also did my best to make sure that Randy's kids got everything they deserved. I single-handedly got his daughter into law school. I invented a scholarship just for her and gave it to her. Of course, the scholarship ended the year that she got her degree. The scholarship also deposited the full amount into an account. She was also never able to find out where the money came from. Her grades were excellent, and she received a few bonuses during her time in school from her mysterious benefactors. The fact that he wasn't able to support his family and barely contributed to their upkeep was rough on Randy. He was a proud man and wanted to be both self-sufficient and a provider. Finding that he was neither hurt his pride. He started drinking and over time became obsessive with it. To his credit, he never became violent or abusive towards his wife or his daughter, but towards the end, he was only a shadow of the man he once was. I also looked at the changes my actions brought about in me. I too was no longer the man I'd been when I first discovered my wife's cheating. I had always been a soft-spoken, easygoing guy. I'd been open and honest for most of my life, but the trauma of discovering that the woman I loved had betrayed me on a regular and continuing basis had unhinged me. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a psychopath who could calmly and with relish plan and oversee the systematic destruction of a man whose only mistake had been to have sex with the wrong woman. I still saw myself. I still saw John Forrest, an all-around nice guy and family man. Shouldn't a villain have some kind of recognizable traits? In the old days, all of the bad guys wore black hats. Maybe I should trade my Mustang in for a black one. But even as I'd wondered about those things, I continued. I couldn't stop myself. My shattered heart needed revenge more than healing. My soul screamed for vengeance far more than forgiveness. Even as I watched Randy's life fall apart, I watched Erica. I found that I simply didn't trust her anymore. It's a terrible thing not to have faith in the woman you've pledged to love and cherish forever, but that was one of the things that her affair with Randy did to me. It destroyed not only our marriage, but my ability to trust anyone completely. So, for a full 5 years, while I crushed Randy under my heel, I also watched Erica and prepared for my divorce. Unlike most men who have a few days or maybe a few weeks to try to protect their assets, I had 5 years to prepare. I'd originally planned for more than that. Erica had been, though fading, still relatively decent-looking when we divorced. I'd intended to wait until she was on the full downswing, but Randy hadn't been able to keep going for as long as I thought. For 5 years, I'd hidden and squirreled away as much money as I could. I didn't need to worry about the house that we lived in, because it wasn't ours. The home had been in my family for generations. We lived in it because my parents, who were still alive, didn't need a place that big. When I went through the divorce, I made sure the lawyers knew my parents owned the house and simply allowed me to live there rent-free. When Erica came back from the conference, she texted Randy about how much she'd enjoyed their dinner together and how wonderful the kiss had been. She had also told him that she missed the times when they'd made love, but she was glad that it hadn't happened this year. She'd always felt guilty about being unfaithful to me, as she was sure that Randy felt the same way about his wife. She told him that what they had now, their sexless romance, was actually better because they could enjoy their relationship that way until they both died with no guilt on either side. Maybe they were growing older and their love didn't need to be expressed physically. Just being together was enough. That way they'd be together forever, and she ended the text with, "Until next year, my love." I read that text as I was waiting for my luggage at the airport. I wanted to strangle Erica. And though I still loved her in some ways, my feelings for her changed drastically. Sometimes it was hard for me to hold it all together. When Erica got home, I was sitting in the den watching a football game. She came in and wrapped her arms around me and tried to kiss me. I moved away from her and told her I had a cold and didn't want to make her sick. "Just make sure we're better by this weekend," she said, smiling. "Why? What happens this weekend?" I asked. "You and I are going off on vacation together, remember?" she said. "We always go after my boring conference." "Well, maybe you could do a mother-daughter vacation and take Sam this year," I said. "I really can't get away from work this week." "But honey, it's the weekend," she whined. "You'd really only miss 2 days of work. Think about it, 4 nights and 3 days in Hawaii. It would be just the two of us." Thinking about it gets me hot. We might never leave the hotel room. I bought all kinds of nasty new things to wear for you. I wondered how many of those things that Randy would have seen if they'd gotten together earlier. "Erica, we're under a wage freeze and the company is trying to cut costs every way they can. I have to make sure that they never get the idea that I'm one of the costs they could cut," I said. "I understand, honey," she said. "I'll go call Sam. I want you in the bedroom 10 minutes after I get upstairs, though." She went up the stairs, and I heard her talking to my daughter, Samantha, on the phone. At the same time, she texted Randy again, wondering whether or not he'd received her previous text. It just disgusted me. When I didn't come to bed, she came looking for me. I dove on the couch and pretended to be asleep. Over the next few weeks, I came to terms with things. It was a big adjustment. I became a far better actor than I ever thought I could be. We still had sex, more or less, as regularly as we had before. I don't know whether or not Erica enjoyed it as much, but I sure did. I didn't have to concentrate on pleasing her anymore because I just didn't give a damn whether she got off or not. I had to look at things from a totally different viewpoint. Instead of thinking about Erica as my wife that I loved, I just looked at her as some woman I was sleeping with. Our sex was raw and less loving, but at the same time, it was more adventurous. Erica had always been kind of vanilla when it came to sex. During the guilt period just after the conference when she needed to assure me that she was mine, she rarely refused me anything. I started sleeping with her like that. It was the first time for us, even after all of those years of marriage. Before Erica could protest and tell me that she wasn't the kind of woman who did that, she was. The next year when conference time came around, I watched her intently, looking for a sign that she was in contact with Randy. I checked her phone account online to make sure that she hadn't received any calls from the Boston area. She hadn't received any, but she'd sent several texts to Randy's phone. She'd become more and more frustrated that Randy never answered her. She tried calling a few of her friends who also knew Randy and found out that he'd had a run of bad luck. She found out for the first time that he'd been brutally beaten and robbed following the conference the previous year. He'd also been fired, and no one knew where exactly he was working. She'd sent him several texts asking him to simply meet her for dinner at her hotel. None of them were answered. Her final attempt came when she got one of her friends who knew Randy to go to his house and tell him that she wanted to hear from him. Randy had told the friend that he didn't remember her, and since he no longer worked in the industry, saw no reason to contact her, especially since he wasn't attending the conference. Erica was heartbroken. She told me that she didn't feel up to attending the conference this year. After that, I told her that she needed to go. She went every year and suffered through it. This year shouldn't be any different than last year. "What's different?" I asked her point blank, even though I already knew. My flight landed 2 hours after hers did. I watched her the whole day and almost blew it. Erica didn't even stay the night. She flew back home at the end of the day. While she was heading for the airport, I called her and told her how much I missed her. I told her that I had to go out of town for the evening, but it didn't really matter since she'd be at her conference. She told me that she couldn't stand us being apart, and she was flying home early. I guess I'd expected her to try to hook up with another guy, but she didn't. She just went to the lectures and the expo, and as soon as it was over, she flew home. The following year, she tried to get me to go to the conference with her so she could show me how boring it was. After that, she simply stopped going. For the last 2 years, Erica has been totally faithful to me. I have, from time to time, either watched her myself or even hired a PI for a few days. She hasn't done a thing to arouse any suspicion. If I didn't know any better, I'd have thought that she was the perfect wife. At least she tried to be. The problem was that once trust is gone, things will never be the way they were before. So when we sat out on our deck and relaxed in our big swing together, I always wondered if she was thinking about Randy and how their love would last until one of them died. When she woke me up on a lazy Sunday morning by doing my Johnson, I always wondered if she was imagining doing it to Randy. As a result, I was never able to give Erica my heart totally again. No matter how romantic she tried to make things, I always looked for an ulterior motive. For the past 5 years, Erica has been simply a maid with benefits, and a very expensive one. In the 2 years before the divorce, I looked at her body often. Sometimes I felt like a farmer inspecting his crops. Yep, her tits are starting to sag, I'd notice. It won't be long now, or I'd see a few more lines on her face. We're getting there, I'd think. Erica, honey, I'd say, have another piece of cake. Crap, eat a big one. I don't want me to get any fatter, she'd say. I love you, I'd tell her, so it doesn't matter. She'd smile and hug me or give me a peck on the cheek, which was all I'd allow. She was sure that I meant that no matter how fat she got, that I'd still love her. But I meant that it didn't matter because I was sure that our marriage would be over soon, so she could eat a cow or look like one, and it wouldn't matter to me. Our life was good on the surface. We had friends that we did things with, and we spent a lot of time with our daughter and her husband. Things were good. For years, I actually believed that Erica had almost forgotten about her affair, or she'd thought that she'd gotten away with it. After all, 5 years is a long time. If nothing had been discovered after all of that time, did it still matter? A couple of days before the ill-fated dinner, one of my PI friends in Boston had given me the news. Randy had been fired from his latest job. He was working in the fast food industry. Because of his drinking, the manager wouldn't let Randy work inside the restaurant. He was taking care of the landscaping around the restaurant for minimum wage. He shoveled snow and cut grass. On other days, he had to wear a costume that made him look like the restaurant's clown mascot and spin a sign that invited passing drivers to eat in the restaurant. Randy had fallen pretty far over the 5 years. He was now in his late 40s, a college graduate who worked for minimum wage dressed like a clown, hawking burgers. All of his KO workers, except for the store manager, were 18 years, old or younger. They used Randy as an example of why going to college was a waste of time. One kid told his mother, right in front of Randy. She'd come to make the kid quit working at the restaurant because his grades in high school had been slipping. "What's the point, Ma?" he asked her. "Even if I graduate and you and Pop spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on me going to college, like Randy's parents probably did back in the last century, how do we know that I won't end up back here in that clown suit? Crap, Ma, I'm better off than he is right now, and I haven't even been to college. At least I work inside the restaurant and I make more than minimum wage. If I go to college, I might make even less." As I've said before, Randy had once been a proud man. Hearing the kid's sermon on the state of his life drove Randy further into depression. Randy was so distraught that he didn't pay attention to where he was flinging his sign. Some of the observers said it was on purpose. Others swear it was a freak accident. Randy threw the sign up in the air, and it came down on a customer, shocking her and knocking her bag of food out of her hands. She started yelling at Randy, and he went berserk. When the police arrived, he was still kicking one of her hamburgers down the street as if it was a street hockey puck and calling her names. Randy was fired on the spot. He got his last check and used it to buy himself a bottle and a rope. He went home, and before he started drinking, he used his college degree one last time. His degree was in manufacturing technology. He manufactured the best noose he could and climbed up onto the edge of a chair and started drinking with the noose around his neck. As he drank, he thought about all of the joys and mistakes in his life. He thought about his career and its downward spiral. He thought about his daughter and how she no longer respected him. He thought about his wife and how they had once been a couple that everyone they knew envied. Now she barely tolerated him, and they slept in separate bedrooms. It hadn't been the changes in Randy's career that had doomed his marriage. It had been the way he handled each successive failure. They'd just been pulling further and further apart over the years. Part of it was that Randy was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Randy died never knowing that it had been me all along ruining him. He thought that it was just bad luck. I'd always intended to tell him someday. It would have been my final stroke of vengeance, but I never got the chance. The last thing that Randy thought about before drinking himself into a stupor, losing his balance and dying was Erica. He traced the beginnings of his bad luck to his friendship with her. He was never honest enough to admit that he'd had an affair and slept with a married woman. He blamed all of his bad luck on Erica. After all, the start of his bad luck had been when Erica's husband had discovered them and beaten Randy so bad he was hospitalized. Everything had gone downhill from there and simply never stopped going. His last thoughts were a wish that he'd never met her. His last words were about her, too. Ducking which, he thought, as the alcohol in his system caused his brain to shut down his consciousness. When I wake up, I'll figure out some way to get back at her. Randy's wife came home and discovered the body. It was sad that she couldn't even come up with enough emotion to cry. In a way, she felt glad for him because her husband had really suffered in recent years, and at least this way he could move on. He was beyond his pain and suffering. One of Erica's former colleagues, who knew her and Randy, had emailed her and told her about his death and how it had come about. She'd called her and got all of the details about the last few years of Randy's life. Erica was shocked. I'd heard from my PI before Erica was notified, so I knew to expect something. She was definitely off of her game. I watched her and couldn't tell if it was because she'd lost someone that she loved, or if she was just thinking about how fleeting life is. That night, she tried to sleep with me to death. She held on to me like she was worried about losing me. She even cried a little when I asked her why. I didn't know what to expect. I guess I was expecting her to tell me that she'd lost a friend from her past, but what she told me was anything but that. "I just love you so much," she said, "and I'm so glad to have you. I don't know what I'd do if anything ever happened to take you away from me." Yeah, I know it. I'm a sucker, and the woman got to me one last time. That night, the second round was different. We made love like we always used to. I did things to her that I hadn't done in years. Instead of pounding her like a drum and then going to watch the news, I spent a long time just kissing her, holding her, and letting her know that I loved her too. I stupidly believed that I was healing, and I could trust her again. It was as if over the past 5 years a scab had finally formed over my wounded heart. The next night, as we had dinner with Sammy and Darren, I held her hand as we ate, and we gave each other longing glances. Samantha had even asked us why we were still so much in love, after all of the years we'd been together. Then Erica had to go and open up her big mouth and ruin it all by trying to get Samantha to name my grandson after Randy. Things were never the same. I'd spent years preparing for the moment when all of this came to pass, and I knew then why everything I did to Randy had just never been enough. It wasn't as if I hadn't done enough to Randy. What I'd done to Randy over the years had been the equivalent of unloading a full clip into him, and then reloading the clip and emptying it into him again. The problem was that Randy alone hadn't been responsible for my pain. In fact, he'd been the lesser of the two evils. Randy hadn't promised before God and all of our friends to love, honor, and cherish me all the days of his life. That had been Erica. In fact, before I'd confronted him in Boston and whipped his ass, I hadn't known Randy at all. What I had done for the past 5 years had been bad. It had been shameful, and more than anything else, it had been cowardly. It was as if I'd been a normal-sized high school student, and one of the big, hulking guys on the football team had pushed me down, so to get revenge, I ran across campus and beat the crap out of one of the nerds on the chess team. Most of my revenge had been misdirected. While Randy did deserve a bit of it, Erica deserved more. In the days following the dinner, Erica tried to come home only to have me give her all of her clothing and personal items that I'd packed for her. The first night, she called me, and I wouldn't speak to her other than to tell her that I thought that this coming Saturday would be a good day for her to come over to the house and take any furniture or appliances that she thought she deserved. I suggested that she bring our daughter and son-in-law along. One of them could call me to verify that the items that she took were not against my wishes. I told her that I'd arranged to be gone all day Saturday, and I'd come back Saturday evening when she called and told me that she was done. It didn't quite turn out that way. When I pulled into my driveway Saturday evening and went into the house, Erica was still there. Samantha was there too, and they wanted for us to sit down and have a talk. "John, I love you," she said. "I love you with all of my heart. I'd never do anything to purposefully hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so much sorrier than you'd ever believe." "Oh, I believe you're pretty sorry," I said. "You may be about the sorriest excuse for a wife that I've ever seen." "Can't we talk about this?" she asked. "We've been together for almost 30 years. We can't throw all of that away over something that happened and ended a long time ago." "John, why didn't you confront me about this when you found out? I can't imagine how much pain you've been carrying around with you for the past 5 years. I'm beginning to understand a lot of things now. I understand why there's been a wall between us for the past few years. This is the reason, isn't it?" I sighed and nodded. "And that last night was so wonderful," she said. "It was the best sex we've ever had. You must have found out that Randy had died, and you thought that this was all behind us until I opened my mouth." I nodded again. "John, can you let me talk?" she asked. "I really need to get this out of my system. I know that what I did was wrong, but it's been over for years, and yes, I know that you ended it, and I have some questions I'd like you to answer when I'm done. Okay?" "Erica, I don't have to listen to anything," I said. "I could throw you out of here right now. I'm going to let you have your say, but only for one reason. I want to get this divorce over with and wrapped up as quickly as possible so I can move on with my life. If I listen to you now, you'll have had your say, so you won't be able to go to the courts and tell them that I never gave you a chance to talk about things. So, start talking, but first, there are a couple of things I'd like you to explain while you talk. When did this start with Randy and why?" "Okay, John. This is 2010. We got married in 1980, so I guess it started in 1982, she said. So this has been going on for 28 years? I screamed. I had no idea it had been that long. I guess you and Randy looked at it differently. Maybe he only counted it from when you guys started sleeping together. I looked at Samantha, and she looked at her mother. John, there's no chance possible that Samantha is anyone's child except yours, she said. The conference is in July. Samantha was born in January. It's just not possible, but you kind of hoped, didn't you? I spat. Don't tell me that the possibility of it never crossed your mind. Samantha looked at her mother, and the expression on her face wasn't good. Sammy, Angel, I love you more than life itself. For the past 5 years, you've been the only person I could trust completely. Most of my heart is yours, baby, but could we do a DNA test? It doesn't matter now in the least. I'll never treat you or my grandkids any different. I just need to verify this, I said. John, I already told you, she began. Why should I believe anything you've ever said? I asked calmly. From the very start of our marriage, you've been lying to me the whole time. Since our marriage is over with, it means you did lie to me for the entire marriage. No, John, it's not like that. I love you, she said. I've always loved you, you just don't understand. Well, start talking, I told her. I'm giving you time to make me understand, but you need to give it everything you've got. This is the last time we'll be speaking without going through lawyers. John, you're not serious, she said. I only cheated on you once, and that was years ago. It isn't worth throwing away 30 years together on. For the past 5 years, I haven't seen or heard from Randy. You're punishing me for something that ended a long time ago. Or I think that's unfair. You're not thinking straight. I know you haven't, I said. You know I haven't what? She asked. I know you haven't seen or heard from Randy in 5 years. You did try to contact him 4 years ago, though, the year after the last conference you spent together. You tried to find out when he'd be arriving at the conference for your yearly get-together, but he didn't answer any of your texts. You tried to get in touch with him through friends. The friends told you that he didn't remember you. He did, but he was afraid. He knew that if he answered you, I'd either beat him completely to death this time, or, worst, tell his wife and ruin his marriage. So you know that it's over, she said, smiling. How do I know that? I asked. The last thing you sent to him 5 years ago was a text message where you told him that your love would last until one of you died. It's barely been 5 years, but oh wait, he is dead now, isn't he? But then again, maybe you weren't lying after all. You did love him enough to try to get Sam to name my grandson after him, even though it cost you our marriage. No, John, you don't understand, she said. You and I had only been married for 2 years when I went to that first conference. I met Randy there, and he was the nicest guy. I missed you a lot. It was the first time I'd ever been away from you. I kept leaving the lectures to try to call you, but you were working. Randy and I started talking, and he just made me feel comfortable. He was so much like you. The next year we met again, and we got even closer. We even had dinner together. We talked and we kept talking until they threw us out of the restaurant. I never wanted to stop talking to him, but you have to understand, a lot of it was because he was so much like you. We hadn't been together for that long, and sometimes I needed to run things by someone to see how you'd react to them. It wasn't until the 4th year that we slept together, and then it was an accident. We'd both gotten really drunk, and we just ended up in bed. We woke up the next morning, and we were both consumed with guilt. We could barely even look at each other. We didn't even say goodbye. The next year was the 5th year. We kind of avoided each other, but truthfully, I missed my friend. I was, of course, pregnant with Sam that year, so unless Samantha took over a year to come to term, there's no way that he was her father. We didn't even have dinner or talk that year. The next year, he came over and told me how sorry he'd been about everything that had happened 2 years prior. He blamed it on himself, and told me that he thought it was stupid for us to avoid each other because of a mistake. So we had dinner, and to tell you the truth, for over 2 years, I'd been avoiding him and fantasizing about what sex with him had been like. We'd both been drunk, and I wanted to remember what it had been like. So at that point, it had been 6 years, and we'd only slept together once. Once, and then it had been a drunken thing. That year, dinner was all that happened. The following year, again, nothing happened. But there was this weird tension between us. It had started to seem like we only went to the conferences to see each other. Year 8, just to break that tension, we had sex. I feel the most guilt about that one. For the past 3 years, I'd been avoiding him and fantasizing about what sex with Randy would be like. It was awful. It was worse than awful, and it was boring. You already know that sex isn't really about size, but Randy's equipment was not really your equal in terms of dimensions, and worse than that. I guess Randy had been with his wife for a very long time, and he knew exactly the kinds of things she liked. However, they weren't the same. Things that I like. I realized then that I'd made a terrible mistake. The next year I avoided Randy again. I don't mean that I didn't have dinner with him or just didn't have sex with him. I didn't even speak to him. I basically hid. I did go over to him towards the end and pretend that I'd just run into him after looking for him for a long time. I asked him a lot of questions about his wife and then left. The year after that, John, we'd been going to that conference for 10 years. Randy was waiting for me at the airport. He kept telling me about how special that year was. We'd been friends, as he called it, for 10 years. It was like our anniversary or something. I ended up giving him a mercy sleep and suffering through it because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He really was a nice guy. Yeah, I said so nice that sleeping with him was worth more than your own marriage. John, you have to understand, he really was a lot like you, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings, plus, it only happened once a year. There was nothing wild or strange about it. It was like old people's sex. On the other hand, look at what you and I do. There was no comparison. Randy wasn't experimental. It was like romantic sex without the romance. I've never given him a BJ, and he's only been in one place, if you know what I mean. Erica, you don't understand this either, I said. You and I started getting experimental after I found out about you. Think about it. I let you give me BJs, but I don't do you anymore. I'm not sticking my mouth anywhere that Randy's been. And I started sleeping with you because I wanted to have something that Randy hadn't had. But also because, in a way, I wanted to hurt you and make you do something that you didn't want to do. Until a few nights ago, the time that you just said was the best sex we ever had. You and I haven't made love either. There hasn't been any romance because on my part, I was just sleeping with you like I'd do a hoe. You were just there, and you were available. Her face fell a little bit then. So for the next few years, I just survived it. I knew that every year I'd look forward to being with Randy at the conference. He was a great friend, and though I dreaded it, I knew that I'd have to endure having sex with him at the end. A few years after that, I started making up excuses. One year I was on my period. The next year, I put up with it. The following year, I claimed that I had a yeast infection. The year after that, I was on the rag again, so I went about 3 years without having to sleep with him. Then we'd do it, and I'd skip a few years. The year that had ended, we hadn't slept together in 4 or 5 years. He always talked about it like he really loved having sex with me, but it was like pulling teeth for me, but he was my friend. He liked hearing how much I cared for him. We often told each other we loved each other. I never really felt or meant any of that, or I just didn't want to hurt him. So, you chose to hurt me instead? I snapped. John, how were you hurt? She asked. It had gone on for over 20 years. In that same 20 years, you and I probably had sex literally over 2,000 times, and I loved them all. In total, I had sex with Randy maybe 8 times at the very max, and hated every time that I can even remember. If it had been a case where I put Randy ahead of you, I could understand it, but that never happened. If it had been a case where I gave you sloppy seconds, or did something to embarrass you, I could understand it, but that never happened. I love you too much for that. This was a once-a-year thing that happened so far away from where we lived that no one who knows us would have been in the vicinity, so there's no way that you've been embarrassed by this. And even the year that you beat poor Randy up and ended it, it was already ending on its own. Since you know about my text to him, you probably also know that we had spoken at dinner about how much better things were. That we weren't having sex, just enjoying each other's company. That relationship would have ended on its own soon anyway. I was never going to have sex with him again. That was what I meant by we were better without the guilt. I was just trying to let him down easily. I figured that the relationship would naturally drift apart without me having to hurt his feelings. John, you have to believe me. I love you. I love only you. Whatever I did with Randy was just a stupid mistake that I made a long time ago, and I didn't know how to get out of it. You and I have so much more history, love, and life together. Please don't throw it all away. I sat back and looked at her, trying to process everything she'd said. The anger inside me was still boiling, but I could see the pain and sincerity in her eyes. This was the woman I'd loved for decades, the mother of my child, my partner in life. But the betrayal cut so deep. I understand, Erica, I said slowly. I understand that you made a mistake and that you regret it, but the fact remains that you betrayed me. You betrayed us. Every time you met with him, every time you said you loved him, you took something away from us. You destroyed my trust, my faith in you, in our marriage. And while I can see that you're sorry and maybe even understand why you did what you did, I don't think I can ever get past it. Tears streamed down her face as she listened. John, please, she whispered. I will do anything to make this right. Anything. Just give us another chance. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. Please don't end our marriage over something that's been over for so long. I shook my head. It's not just the affair, Erica. It's the lies, the deception. For 28 years, you've kept this from me. For For 28 years, you've allowed me to believe that our marriage was something it wasn't. You took away my ability to make an informed decision about my own life, about whether or not I wanted to stay with someone who could do that to me. You robbed me of that choice." She sobbed uncontrollably, and Samantha reached out to comfort her. "Dad, please," Samantha said. "Mom has made mistakes, but she's trying to make it right. Can't you at least try to work through this for me, for the grandkids?" I looked at my daughter, the pain in her eyes mirroring my own. "Sammy, I love you. I love you more than anything, but this isn't something I can just forgive and forget. It's been eating away at me for years, and I can't live like this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not." Erica tried to speak again, but I held up my hand. "Enough, Erica. I don't want to hear anymore. You've said your piece. Now it's time for me to move on. I'm filing for divorce. You can take whatever you want from the house, but I need you out of here by the end of the week." "Dad, please," Samantha begged. "Don't do this." "I'm sorry, Sammy," I said, my voice breaking, "but this is something I have to do for myself. I can't live with this betrayal any longer." Erica collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with sobs. Samantha knelt beside her, trying to console her. I stood up and walked out of the house, the weight of years of betrayal and pain pressing down on me as I drove away. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, all the memories we'd made. It hurt to think that it had all been tainted by Erica's affair, by her lies, but I knew that staying with her would only prolong the pain. I needed to find a way to heal, to move forward with my life. I spent the next few days getting my affairs in order. I filed for divorce and made arrangements for Erica to move out of the house. Samantha tried to talk to me several times, but I couldn't bring myself to discuss it further. The decision was made, and I needed to focus on the future. The day Erica moved out was bittersweet. She took only what she needed, leaving behind many of the things we'd accumulated over the years. As she walked out the door for the last time, she turned to look at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "John, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know, Erica," I said, "but sorry isn't enough. Goodbye." With that, she left, and I was alone in the house that had once been filled with love and laughter. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but I also knew that I needed to find a way to rebuild my life, to find peace and happiness once again. Over the next few months, I focused on myself. I threw myself into my work, spent time with friends, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy, but slowly I began to heal. I realized that while Erica's betrayal had been devastating, it didn't define me. I was stronger than that and could find happiness again. Samantha eventually came to terms with the divorce. She still loved her mother, but she understood why I couldn't stay. Our relationship grew stronger as we supported each other through the difficult times. In the end, I found peace in knowing that I'd done what was best for me. I'd reclaimed my life and my happiness, and while the scars of Erica's betrayal would always be there, they no longer controlled me. I was free to move forward and build a new future, one filled with hope and possibility. 5 years have passed since that fateful day when I finally walked away from Erica. I've spent those years rebuilding my life, but the pain and betrayal still echo in my mind, especially after the shocking revelation that Samantha isn't my biological daughter. The truth came out during a heated argument with Erica about the divorce settlement. Erica, in a moment of desperation, blurted out that Samantha was Randy's daughter. A paternity test confirmed it. It was devastating. The girl I had loved and raised as my own was not biologically mine. The betrayal cut even deeper, and it was the final straw. Samantha, despite everything, stood by her mother. She couldn't understand why I was so adamant about moving on. It was like a knife in my heart when she chose to support Erica after all that had happened. In the end, I decided to remove Samantha from my will. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I felt I needed to take control of my life and my legacy. We split our possessions 50-50ths, with Erica taking half of our savings and some personal items. I kept the house, but it felt empty without the family I once thought was mine. So I sold it and moved into a modern apartment in the city. The transition was hard, but I found solace in my work and slowly began to date again. It was during a business conference that I met Lisa. She was a breath of fresh air, intelligent, kind, and genuinely interested in me. Lisa had her own successful career as a marketing executive, and her life story was refreshingly free of the complications that had marred mine. She had been married once before, but her husband passed away in a tragic accident. Despite her loss, she remained optimistic and full of life. We started dating, and for the first time in years, I felt alive again. Lisa had a way of making me forget the past and focus on the present. Her presence in my life was like a healing balm, slowly mending the wounds that Erica's betrayal had left. While I was finding happiness again, Erica's life took a turn for the worse. After the divorce, she moved into a small apartment and tried to find a job, but her depression and guilt consumed her. She began drinking heavily, and her health deteriorated rapidly. The weight of her actions and the loss of her family took a severe toll on her. Erica's attempts to reconnect with Samantha were met with limited success. Samantha, though supportive of her mother, couldn't fully understand the depth of her mother's actions. The strain between them grew, and Erica felt increasingly isolated. She tried to find solace in alcohol, but it only pushed her further down the spiral. Eventually, Erica lost her job and ended up on welfare. Her once vibrant appearance faded as she battled her demons alone. I heard from mutual friends that she had been hospitalized several times due to alcohol poisoning and severe depression. It was heartbreaking to hear, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out. The woman I once loved had destroyed too much of my life, and I needed to protect my newfound happiness. Samantha, despite her efforts to help, couldn't save her mother from herself. She had her own family to care for, and the burden of her mother's decline weighed heavily on her. The rift between us remained, but I found peace in knowing that I had done what was best for me. Lisa and I got married last year. Our wedding was small and intimate, attended by close friends and family. It was a day filled with love and hope for the future. Lisa's presence in my life has been a constant source of strength and joy. We've built a new life together, one free from the shadows of the past. Looking back, I realized that the years of pain and betrayal were a necessary journey to bring me to this point. I've learned that forgiveness isn't always about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of the past. While I may never fully forgive Erica or forget what she did, I found a way to move forward and embrace the happiness I deserve. Erica's downward spiral is a tragic reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the importance of honesty in relationships. As for Samantha, I hope that one day we can rebuild our relationship, but for now, I focus on the life I have with Lisa. Grateful for the second chance at happiness that life has given me. I took epic revenge after being cheated on by my wife and her affair partner, rebuilding my life. Around 2 a.m., aside from a few dim lights in the hallways, it was mostly dark. I could only make out silhouettes and shadows in my 10x10 cell. Lying on my back with my arms behind my head, I was deep in thought. Instead of sleeping like I should, my mind wandered to things I wished I could forget. Hearing footsteps, I started counting 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I saw him. His face was hard and emotionless, just like everyone else here. He was just doing his job, making his rounds, not looking for friends. I wasn't sure if he saw me, but it didn't matter. He was out there, and I was in here. When he passed by, I stopped counting. No point. He wouldn't be back for another 92 minutes. I looked at the ceiling, planning what to do when I got out. 5 days in a wake-up, and I'd be leaving for good. I'd served about 7 months of my 1-year sentence. My job was waiting for me, but everything else would be different. My older brother had fixed my car, taken care of my house, and managed my dwindling savings. Was I still angry? Angry didn't even come close, but I buried those emotions until I got out. I realized why guys doing 10 to 20 years come out as empty shells. All traces of humanity are left at the door when you check in. Survival is key, and this place is a resort compared to the hardcore prison up north. I closed my eyes again, hoping to get a few hours of sleep. I missed my old bedroom with the blackout shades, but I knew my life would never be the same. "I'll pick you up next Tuesday," my brother Gary told me over the phone in the visitor center during our last visit. We looked at each other through the plexiglass wall, hopefully for the last time. "Anything you want to eat your first night out?" "A steak, a big steak, medium rare." Gary grinned. "Steve, you're too easy. I thought you'd ask for something tougher to sneak past my wife. You'll stay with Andy and me until you're set. There's no food or much furniture left in your house. This gives you time to get what you need. It's not the Ritz-Carlton, but it's clean, and you can come and go as you please," he smiled. I started before he cut me off. "Forget it. We're family. That's what family does. Don't worry about Mom and Dad. They'll come around once things settle down, but we knew that wouldn't be anytime soon." Emotions ran deep on both sides. "Seen my kids lately? 2 weekends ago at Mom and Dad's. Heather looks the same, but John has this bowl-shaped haircut that's all the rage. It looks awful." I told him so. You know what he said? Said I wasn't his dad and didn't have to listen to me. I would have slapped him, but Mom was there. "You'll have your hands full with that one." John wouldn't have dared say something like that if I was around. Even though I was his dad, he and his sister would stay with their mom after I got out. I had time, plenty of it. Once I was out of this place, I'd wait for the right moment. No rush. Even though the divorce was final, I still owned half the house. Kathy owed me about $65,000 to buy me out. She likely raided our bank lockbox. grabbing all our bonds and CDs. Thankfully, I gave my lawyer a list of everything, so there would be no dispute when I got released, which would be soon. Kathy and my ex-friend Bob really screwed me over, but that was in the past. I was caught off guard the first time, and it wouldn't happen again. I was waiting, remembering, and looking forward to better days when I got out of this hellhole. Only then could I build my life and start fresh. I hoped I could hold it together until then. Before jail, life was good because I never saw it coming. Weeks before, some so-called friends hinted they knew something but never said anything. What were they thinking? Did they think I knew and was okay with it? Everyone must have known. I would never have tolerated it, but people didn't want to get involved. We had a great marriage, I thought. 12 years, 2 kids, a nice house and good jobs. Sure, we had minor disagreements, but I loved my wife and never imagined what she was capable of. We didn't have many friends, just a few couples from the neighborhood. Most had been married over 7 years and were about our age. We all had at least 2 kids, except Bob and his wife Connie. They'd been trying to have a child forever with no luck. Kathy probably knew why, but I tried to stay out of everyone's personal business. Connie started drinking heavily about a year ago. At first, she was just melancholy, but then it got ugly. Bob drank little, taking care of her. "Bob, honey, get me another drink," she'd start. By the end of the night, she'd be demanding drinks, and Bob had to carry her home. It was sad, but his problem, not mine. "Connie was a mess tonight," I said, getting ready for bed. "I think she passed out more than once. Greg and Judy probably left early because she started undressing and asked Greg to help her. No one was letting her near the pool. I felt sorry for Bob. My wife said Connie's devastated about not having kids, but taking it out on Bob isn't the answer. I told her she could adopt, but she wouldn't hear it. She blamed Bob for their problems. They'll either work it out or get divorced," I said. "We're supposed to go out to dinner next week. I hope she behaves, but I'm not counting on it." "I'll talk to her this week. Maybe she'll cool it for one night," my wife said, trying to be optimistic. Connie didn't cool it. "Waiter, how's a girl supposed to get a drink around here?" she yelled, slurring. She started on Bob again, and he was about to lose it when I intervened. "Come on, Connie, you promised me a dance," I said, pulling her to the dance floor. She tried to refuse, but I insisted. I danced with her for 3 songs while my wife talked to Bob, who looked miserable. When we got near the hall, Connie excused herself to the ladies' room. After 5 minutes, I debated what to do. I asked 2 women going in to check on Connie. It wasn't good. "Is she wearing a bright yellow dress?" one of the women asked, peeking out of the restroom. When I nodded, she shook her head. "She's passed out in a stall. If you want, I'll stand guard while you get her." I went in, propped her up by the sink, and splashed cold water on her face. It helped for a moment, but then she collapsed again. I practically carried her back to our table. "Bob, let me help you get Connie to your car. She's out cold and won't wake up anytime soon." I stood there holding a very drunk Connie. Bob looked embarrassed and angry. "Steve, I've got it. Sit down. This isn't the first time, but it will be the last." Despite his objections, I carried her out while he grabbed her purse and said his goodbyes. I laid Connie on the back seat and patted Bob's back. "Sorry, man. What else could I say? Thanks for your help. I'm at my wit's end and don't know what to do. You two need counseling. You can't figure this out alone. If you need support, call Kathy and me. We'll help however we can." "All right," he replied, though I knew it was lip service. Their problems seemed too deep to fix. I gave them a couple of months, tops. I wasn't far off, but no one expected the final outcome. 3 weeks later, just after 10:30 p.m. on a Thursday, we heard sirens and saw bright lights at the end of our block. Everyone ran outside to see what was happening. "Kathy, stay here. I'll check it out." I joined the crowd and saw the fire rescue squad prying open Bob's car door. "What's going on? Is Bob all right?"
"It's not Bob, it's Connie. They were arguing. She grabbed his keys, ran out, and sped down the street."
Didn't get far. Connie had rear-ended a parked car at about 40 miles per hour. The ambulance arrived, put her on a stretcher, and drove off with Bob in tow. Their front door was wide open, lights still on, and the house in disarray. I called Kathy and told her what happened, then locked up Bob's house, leaving a note that I had his keys. "How's Connie?" my wife asked when I got home. "Not good. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt and swerved before hitting the car. The airbag deployed, but her head smacked the driver's side window hard enough to shatter it. She was doing about 35 miles per hour. Bob's with her at the hospital. We'll wait. Should we go down there? He's got his hands full. We'll go tomorrow when things settle. Right now, let's get to bed. Tomorrow will come fast." We kissed goodnight but barely slept, worried about Connie. At 11 the next morning, my phone rang. "Steve, Connie's on life support," my wife yelled. "I'm leaving work. Bob's a mess. Someone needs to be there." "Meet me at the hospital," she said frantically before hanging up. Damn, the guy couldn't catch a break. On the way, I grabbed lunch for the three of us and called Kathy's parents to pick up the kids after school. I walked quietly into the waiting room where my wife and others were consoling Bob. "How's she doing?" I asked. "Not good," my wife whispered. "The doctor talked to Bob and he hasn't said much since." "Bob," I said, sitting next to him, "you okay?" It was a dumb question, but I needed an opening line. "Steve, she's not going to get better. There's little brain activity. I don't know what to do." He started to cry. I motioned for everyone to give us space. "Has anyone told Connie's parents?" "They're on their way." "Steve, the hospital staff keeps asking about a living will and donor card. It feels like vultures circling. The doctor asked if I'd consider pulling the plug if she's brain dead. For Christ's sake, she's my wife, not a piece of meat," he was shouting now. "Why can't they just fix her? They're doctors, can't they fix her?" I had no answer. Connie's parents arrived shortly after and went into a room with Bob. There was a lot of loud crying and cursing. Her father seemed to blame Bob for Connie's condition. The doctor went in, and about 20 minutes later everyone came out. Her parents left heartbroken, knowing they'd never talk to their daughter again. We left the hospital around 8 and picked up the kids from Kathy's parents' house. I kept thinking, God, I hope I never have to make that choice. 48 hours later, with Bob, Connie's parents, and the doctor in the room, they turned off the machine keeping her alive. She passed away quietly. We consoled Bob as best we could. Despite her difficult behavior, Bob truly loved her. Funerals tend to bring out the good memories, not the bad ones. The funeral was packed, and everyone was in tears. Bob took it hard, eventually taking a month off to visit his family back east. I assured him we'd take care of his place. "I love you. You know that, don't you?" I said to my wife while getting ready for bed. It had been an exhausting few weeks, and things were getting back to normal. If I'm ever like Connie, just pull the plug. I wouldn't want to be kept alive by a machine. "Steve, don't talk like that. It could never happen to us." Bob returned a few weeks later, somewhat functional. Kathy helped him sort through Connie's belongings. After 3 months, he seemed to be coming to grips with it. We made sure he was included in social events. Neighbors even set him up on a few dates, but nothing came of them. Life went on, or so I thought. 6 months later, Bob seemed to get his spark back. Seeing him smile and enjoy himself again was a relief. He was socializing, and we had our old Bob back. Looking back, maybe I missed some signs. Kathy and I were still close, but something felt off. We were physically engaged as often as before, but something was different. After a few months, I asked Kathy if something was bothering her. "Nothing really, Steve. Why do you ask? You seem a little distant lately." "Everything's fine," she smiled. "Maybe you haven't been getting enough lovemaking. If you want more, just ask." Lovemaking, I thought. She never called it that before, always making love. I smiled, kissed her, and shut down my thoughts. I'll never forget Friday, August 20th. It was the day my world fell apart. Kathy called me at work to say the kids would be with her folks for the weekend and asked what time I'd be home. "I'll make sure I'm home early. Need me to pick up anything?" "No, just let me know when you'll be home." "All right." A million thoughts ran through my mind. It was 3:30, an hour and a half before I could leave. I adjusted my pants, thinking about the fun weekend ahead. I drove home carefully to avoid a speeding ticket, but still made it in 28 minutes. I should have suspected something when I saw 2 cars in the driveway, but one was Bob's. "Hey, honey, I'm home," I called out. Bob and Kathy were in the kitchen. "Hey, Bob, what's going on?" "Steve, I need to talk to you. Please have a seat." Kathy looked nervous, her voice quivering. "I'll just stand," I said. "Steve, I wanted to tell you myself before you get the papers." I was confused. "Kathy, what papers?" She stepped back. "Divorce papers." She could barely say it. My heart skipped a beat. "Kathy, what are you talking about? What divorce papers?" "Steve," Bob started, but I cut him off. "Bob, stay out of this. This is between me and my wife." Then it hit me. I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. "Bob, you should leave now." My hands clenched into fists. "Kathy, you and I need to talk now," I shouted. "Bob, stay," my wife said. "Steve, this involves him too." "Bob, leave now or you'll be leaving in a body bag," I warned. He headed for the door. "Kathy, we need to talk." "Steve, there's nothing to talk about. I'm in love with Bob. I'm sorry." "You? How long has this been going on? Even before Connie died?" Bob stopped, his eyes burning with anger. "Steve, you don't know anything." "Oh, I know enough. While I was consoling you, you were screwing my wife. Get out of my house, both of you." "Steve, it's my house too," Kathy said. "Not anymore. Get out. I'll get my things and leave." "No, leave now, Kathy." "Let's go," Bob said, pulling her to the door. "Listen to him," I taunted. "Steve, I'll come back for my stuff when you've cooled down." You'll be dead by then, I spat. They left, eyes fixed on me. After they left, I lost it. 2 beers and a lot of destruction later, the house was a mess. I threw all of Kathy's belongings on the lawn and set the sprinklers to run for 4 hours. Then I locked the house and drank until I passed out. The next morning, I saw Kathy had taken her stuff. I was still angry and devastated. I didn't call anyone to tell them what happened, but I figured the neighbors knew. I called Kathy's parents to talk to my kids, but her mom wouldn't let me. Steve, Kathy picked them up last night. Nonsense, Fran. She was picking up her clothes from the lawn. Let me talk to my kids. She hung up on me. I called back, but she didn't answer. Furious, I canceled all our credit cards and withdrew all the cash I could from the bank. I made coffee, ate some toast, and planned my day, change the garage code, get new locks, and move anything valuable to my brother's house. Just as I was about to leave, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw a man with a large envelope. He stayed for a few minutes, then left. I told my brother Gary and his wife Andy what happened and asked them to keep it quiet. Then I headed to Home Depot for new locks. On my way back, I saw Bob's car in the driveway and Kathy loading it. I should have driven by, but I was too pissed off for that. Instead of driving by, I sped up, with tires squealing. I turned into my driveway and crashed into the back of Bob's car. Bob jumped into his car just as mine made contact, pushing his car against the closed garage door. I reversed about 15 feet and floored it again, driving his car through the garage door. Steam billowed from under my hood, and my engine made a terrible noise, but it reversed again. I backed up 10 feet, floored it, but my car only moved Bob's a few feet before stalling. Heart pounding, I grabbed my son's aluminum bat from the garage and started swinging, smashing the driver's windows and the windshield. I was about to open Bob's door when I heard loud voices behind me. "Drop the bat and put your hands on your head," a police officer ordered. I complied, dropping the bat and kneeling down. They handcuffed me and put me in the patrol car. Bob, shaken and scared, got out of his car. I wanted to threaten him but couldn't. My wife was crying, talking to the police, and looking at me. I smiled back. Taken downtown, I was booked and given one call. I called my brother Gary. Since it was the weekend, I spent 2 nights in jail before my court appearance on Monday. I pleaded not guilty, and the judge set my bail. Gary bailed me out late that afternoon. "Steve, they're talking about attempted homicide, or at least assault with a deadly weapon." "I know. First, take me to the bank. She's probably cleaned out the accounts, but I need to check." The cash was gone from our accounts, but not the CDs and bonds. However, a court order prevented me from removing any of them. "You could have at least left me $5 in our account." "You really are cheap," I told Kathy when she answered her phone. "I needed that money for me and the kids. Doesn't Bob make enough money? I've got a house payment to make. Maybe I should just make a little fire in the living room, just to take the chill off." "Steve, quit talking crazy. I'm sorry about all of this, but you're making it harder. Why can't you just accept it and move on?" "I'll move on when you send my kids back home." "Steve, I can't, especially in your current frame of mind. I don't think you damaged them, but I can't take that chance. After this is over, I'll let you see them as much as you want, but I can't say the same about you and Bob. This is the last time I'm talking to you. From now on, you'll have to go through my attorney. I'm sorry it happened this way. Kathy, you have no idea how sorry you and Bob are going to be." She hung up. At my court date, my attorney pleaded temporary insanity, arguing my actions were impulsive after Kathy's revelation. Kathy and Bob claimed they feared for their lives and mentioned a restraining order. "Mr. Moore," the judge said, "did you tell Mr. Kelly that if he didn't leave, he'd be leaving in a body bag?" "I don't remember my exact words, Your Honor. It may have been something like that, but how would you feel if a friend was with your wife behind your back?" The judge was unimpressed, and my lawyer quietly reprimanded me. "Steve, say nothing, do you understand? From now on, you don't remember a thing. Is that clear? I'm trying to prove you didn't know what you were doing, and your comments aren't helping." He was right. Chris, my boss and main character witness, backed me completely. He testified that I was a model employee, never losing my temper. After his testimony, the case closed. We awaited the judge's decision, which would come in a few days. Back at work, my boss offered to have some thugs make Bob and Kathy disappear. I declined, preferring to handle it my way. I wondered what that service might have cost. 6 months and $112,000 later, I ended up screwed by both my ex-wife and the system. The divorce went through, and she got 50% of everything. The house and all valuable items were to be sold. She claimed her jewelry was missing and accused me of taking it. I countered that mine was gone too, suggesting she took it all. "You're in jail, are they nuts?" I yelled at my attorney after the judge's sentence. "Steve, it could be worse. You could have liquidated him and faced manslaughter. With good behavior, you'll be out in less than 8 months, and your record will be clean in 2 years. Do the time, get out, and move on. Easy for him to say. I wasn't looking forward to spending 24 hours a day in jail. I appealed, but got nowhere. Within a year, my life went from great to terrible, thanks to Kathy and Bob. Steve, your job will be waiting when you get out. Don't do anything stupid and watch your back, Chris advised after a final visit with my kids. I turned myself in. I started my sentence in the county facility. My brother put money in my inmate account, but most items available were junk. Without a cell phone or computer, I wrote my thoughts on paper and made bi-weekly collect calls to my brother, mom, and kids to stay updated. During a visit, my brother said, "I'll have your car repaired before you get out. I found someone to do it for the insurance payout. I'm taking care of your lawn and installed the new deadbolts." Kathy took the rest of her and the kids' clothes, but left the furniture after I insisted on a court order for removal. I was glad my brother was looking out for me. Kathy allowed my parents to see the kids every other Sunday, but bad-mouthed me and my family. She called me their jailbird father, and planned to set strict rules when I got out. My parents tolerated her to keep communication open. After 7 days, I confirmed my visitation rights every other weekend, a full month in summer, and shared holidays. I informed my boss I'd need a week to readjust once released. I was thrilled to trade my orange jumpsuit for street clothes. Gary was waiting outside. We headed straight to the nearest bar. "To freedom," I said, clinking our bottles before downing the first of 3 beers. "Andy has a steak dinner with all the trimmings waiting for us. You can stay with us for a few nights until you go through your things at the house. It's still up for sale, but there haven't been any offers. Kathy wants to lower the price but needs your approval." I smiled. "All the furniture is still there, but I trashed the master bedroom set as you instructed. Dinner was fantastic. I ate more than I had in 8 months, enjoying the freedom to do as I pleased. I drank too much, vaguely remembering 5 or 6 beers and 3 glasses of wine. I woke up after 10 the next morning and finally managed to get up and hit the bathroom by 11. In the kitchen, I found a note on the counter. "If you're reading this, you survived last night. There's coffee made and everything else is in the fridge. The spare bathroom has soap, a razor, shaving lotion, a toothbrush, and toothpaste. If you need anything else, we'll get it tonight. The keys to your car and house are on the key rack by the back door. Don't do anything stupid. See you around 5:30. My brother knew me well. 2 cups of coffee and an English muffin were all I could manage. After a shower and a shave, I felt almost human again. Gary had laid out a fresh change of clothes, and within an hour, I headed to my house. The outside looked the same. I sat in my repaired car for 10 minutes before going in. Memories flooded my mind. I saw the new deadbolt, and with a turn of the key, I was inside. The place was a mess, with things thrown everywhere. Clothing pieces were scattered on the floor. The kitchen was halfway clean, and the refrigerator still had old food. Leaning against the sink, I saw the damage from when my fist punched the wall and found a stud. I rubbed my knuckles, remembering that night. Upstairs, the kids' closets were empty except for a few forgotten mementos. My bedroom was almost empty except for my dresser and clothes. The dark spots on the carpet showed where our bed and her dresser had been. The room needed a complete redo before I could use it again. The rest of the house needed a thorough cleaning to be sellable, but I wasn't in a hurry to sell. I made a list of repairs and decided I just wanted it done, not necessarily by myself. At the bank, I confirmed she had emptied the lockbox. I needed written proof from the bank and was told they had video recordings as additional proof. My attorney confirmed she had taken everything and filed a motion to get it back. The court had already ordered Kathy to return everything she took from the lockbox. "Steve, she's offering her share of the house for your share of the CDs and bonds. I told her to return everything as directed by the court or face arrest for non-compliance. She can be mad all she wants. My job is to protect your interests. That's why you hire a lawyer," I thought to myself. Back at my house, I took inventory of what I still had. I noted to call a local contractor to fix the walls and Mary Main's to clean the kitchen and dining room where I'd thrown the microwave and dishes. Utilities were still on, so I could move back in once I bought a bed. I just needed a queen-size bed and found a decent set for $900. At least I wouldn't be sleeping on a mattress that my ex-wife had shared with someone else. Hank, the contractor, came over Saturday morning to give me an estimate. "Your walls are solid. Must have hurt when you punched that stud," he said with a smile. "I just need the holes fixed and a fresh coat of white paint. Nothing special," I replied. "How about $200? "That's low. That's my price. Take it or leave it. You did us a favor with Bob and the car. Most of the guys in the neighborhood look up to you now. Randy even told Linda he'd put her in the grave if she ever did what Kathy did to you. You're a neighborhood hero." I thanked him and told him he could start whenever. Within 6 weeks, the bonds and CDs were back in the bank lockbox and the house was repaired and cleaned. Life was starting to get back to normal when my kids spent their first weekend with me. It was awkward. I broke the ice. "Kids, I know this is strange, but this is still your home. Say what you need to. My skin's thicker now, and I don't think anything could shock me anymore. Dad, we love you and are sorry about what Mom did," John said. Heather nodded. "We didn't know about Bob until Mom said we were moving to his house. We weren't happy and still aren't. There was nothing you could do. Even without Bob, your mom and I wouldn't get back together. What we had is over. I'm still your dad, and I love you. I'll always be here for you." We hugged and spent the evening with pizza and a movie. I wanted to slam their mother, but decided not to. Our first weekend was a success. We ended up feeling like a family again, though different. I got John a decent haircut, and life went on. I went to work, had a small social life, and spent time with the kids. John started soccer and Heather dance, keeping me busy. Everyone except my brother told me to move on and start over. "You're still young. You can find another girl, get married, and start a new life." To them, I'd just say, forget it. I wasted 14 years on that witch. If I want to stay mad, that's my right. They hadn't gone through what I had over the last 2 years. Sometimes you need that pound of flesh to make the pain go away, and that's what I was going to get, one way or another. Kathy wanted to lower the house price. I refused. She was pissed, but I didn't care. "Steve, it won't sell at this price in this market. We need to drop it by at least $20,000. If you want to give up $20,000 of your share, fine. Otherwise, the price stays." We eventually divided the bonds and CDs. She spent hers on a new car and a vacation with Bob. I banked mine to start a nest egg. 8.5 months after jail, Bob's house fire. While they were at a soccer game, someone had doused the electrical box and rear of the house with gasoline. The back half was ruined, and they had no power. The next day, 2 police officers came to my door. At the station, they got nothing from me. "I was at a neighborhood party with at least 10 witnesses," I said. "Steve, you were only a block away. You could have done this," one officer accused. "Prove it," I replied. When I'd had enough, I stood up. "Charge me, release me, or I'm calling my lawyer." "We're releasing you, but keeping an eye on you." Mentally, I checked off my list. 1 down, 2 to go. I volunteered to take the kids since they couldn't stay in a powerless house. Repairs would take at least 2 months, so we had a mini vacation together. "Steve, I know you did it, no matter what the police say," Kathy said, picking up the kids one night. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was with our friends. Too bad you and Bob aren't invited anymore. Maybe I could put in a good word," I suggested sarcastically. "Don't bother. We wouldn't go even if they begged us," she responded, sounding bitter. "Well, you have each other, and that's all that matters for now." "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Nothing. Just that you two are lucky to have one another." I smiled, not just on the inside this time. The kids wanted to spend more time with me, which didn't sit well with Kathy or Bob. I heard about shouting matches between Bob and the kids, with them telling him he wasn't their father. Kathy told me to stop stirring up trouble. "Kathy, I don't badmouth you to the kids. You're their mother, and I've told them they have to listen to you. How about Bob?" "Him? He's a backstabbing idiot who's lucky to be alive. Besides that, he's a nice enough guy. If looks could eliminate, I'd be dead. He's good to your kids. Stop bad-mouthing him to them. Not going to happen. He's nothing to me, and I pray I get to piss on his grave one day." She gave me a deadly look. "Not that I'd injury him, of course. Or Steve, so help me. What are you going to do? Kathy, cheat on me, divorce me, put me in jail, make my life hell? Oh wait, you already did all those things. You can't do any more to me. Go back to your husband and leave me alone." Without another word, she walked away. And to think I once loved her. I watched her go, shaking my head. Work was going great. It took me just a couple of weeks to get back up to speed. Chris soon pushed me to take over 4 more accounts. With no kids or anyone else at home, I had the time. After contacting the customers, I scheduled 2-day trips to each facility to get familiar with their operations. 3 accounts were easy, but TW Incorporated was different. They were changing their manufacturing process, requiring monthly trips to keep up. The assigned person was knowledgeable but disorganized and arrogant. When I pressed for needed data, "Chris, if I don't get what we need, it'll screw up their system." After 2 calls, I got an intermediary between the engineer and myself. From then on, I met with Monica, who worked directly with the engineer. "Steve, Monica Bradley," she introduced herself, shaking my hand. She had a degree in process engineering and had been with the company for about 5 years. We worked well together, and she got me everything I needed. 2 weeks before finishing phase 1, I asked her out to dinner. "Monica, I'd like to take you and your husband out to dinner as a thank you. The Hilton where I'm staying has a great restaurant. How about 6? We shook hands and I left the plant by 4:30. After catching up on paperwork and emails, I headed to the restaurant. At 6, Monica arrived alone. "Where's your husband?" I asked, parking the car. "Steve, I'm not married." "Oh, sorry, I assumed," I said, noticing the rings on her hand. "I wear these rings to keep things professional. No one hits on a married woman, avoiding maltreatment issues. Plus, married people seem to get promoted faster, I guess because they seem more stable. How do you manage company functions? I just say he's on the road or something. They don't ask anymore." "Well, you had me fooled. We had a wonderful dinner, and by the end I shared highlights of my last 2 years. I can't believe they did that to you. That really sucks. Tell me about it, but it's in the past, and I'm moving on with my life. I was trying to rebuild my life, though revenge was still a priority." "Steve, you're young, and many women would love a guy like you," she said, smiling and blushing. "You're probably right, but I haven't had the time or ambition to date again. I'm still cautious." "Well, you asked me out, didn't you?" "You and your husband," I corrected. "If I hadn't been married, would you still have asked me out?" "Probably. You're easy to talk to and not a pathetic twit like my ex." "I'll take that as a compliment," she said, laughing. Dinner went great. I left the next day and wouldn't be back for a month. I asked her to call me weekly, especially if anything came up. I started feeling more at ease around women, even those outside my inner circle. We went out most nights when I visited, which was every couple of weeks. I still had trust issues but was working on them. Phone calls and emails kept us in touch. After a couple of months, we started kissing and more. I was finally ready to take it to the next level. Am I becoming normal again? I wondered. When Monica said she had a conflict Wednesday night, I thought nothing of it. We'd been physically engaged on Tuesday, and I had forgotten to get contraceptives. "Steve, let's plan for a whole evening on Thursday," she said, kissing me. Thursday, I'll remember to bring protection, I thought. Wednesday, I looked for a new restaurant on the city map. After 6 trips, I'd tried all the local places. I found a nice Indian restaurant about 25 minutes away and decided to give it a try. I ordered a beer and the sampler platter and was ready to relax. I heard a familiar laugh and, to my surprise, saw Monica with another man. They were clearly on more than a first date, holding hands and laughing. I lost my appetite, finished my beer, paid and left. She didn't seem conflicted, I thought. I avoided her on Thursday and went to McDonald's for lunch. By 3, Monica was shadowing me, smiling and flirting. "You take care of your conflict last night?" I asked. "Yes. And tonight, you're all mine." I found a quiet Indian restaurant with a fabulous sampler platter. I looked into her eyes. "What type of food is it?" "Indian food." Her face went pale. "I was there last night and saw someone. I knew. What are the chances?" "Monica, I never blinked." "Steve, I can explain." "No need. I got rid of one lying witch. I don't need another." I walked away and cut my trip short. After ignoring 4 emails, I never got another one. Trust issues still plagued me, and Monica had worsened them. I was reassigned to someone else, thankfully a guy. 3 months later, I got an early Christmas present. Bob was run over by a car while crossing the street. Witnesses only saw a black 4-door car with tinted windows, which matched my black BMW. Saturday night, the police came to my house. My neighbor Tom watched as they approached. "Mr. Moore, we'd like a word," the shorter officer said. "Sure, no problem." "Tom, I'll talk to you later," I told my neighbor. "Mr. Moore, do you own a 22 320i black BMW?" the other officer asked. "Yes, what's this about?" I replied, joking about a parking ticket, but they didn't laugh. "Is the car here?" "Yes, it's in the garage." "What's this about?" I asked. "Sir, we'd like to see the car now." I opened the garage. One officer retrieved a camera and started taking pictures of the front right side of my car. "Can you explain these scratches and marks on the bumper?" "Not a clue. After 8 years, some nicks and scratches are normal. Now that I've answered your questions, what's going on and why are you interested in my car?" "Mr. Moore, there was a hit and run yesterday and witnesses described a black sedan with dark windows like your car. And like a million others in town," I replied, annoyed. "Why me? Did my license plate match or did anyone identify me as the driver?" "The witnesses only saw the car. Well, as you can see, there's no significant damage to the front end. I can account for my whereabouts from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. yesterday. Why pick on me?" "Your history with the sufferer and past threats prompted this visit. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll be on our way." "Wait," I called as they walked back to their car. "Who was hit?" "Mr. Robert Kelly." I smiled. "Is he dead?" "No, but he's in critical condition." They walked away, and I went inside, opened a bottle of wine, and ordered a pizza. I ate most of the pizza and drank the entire bottle of wine in celebration. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip about Bob. Some said the guy just can't catch a break, while others declared he got what he deserved. I was in 7th heaven. 2 days later, Bob took a turn for the worse and died. I looked sharp in a new suit, fresh haircut, and polished shoes. I even had my car washed and waxed. The funeral home wasn't packed, but there were many people outside when I arrived. Conversations stopped as I walked in. I didn't sign the book, just walked down the aisle. Kathy saw me and looked shocked. My children smiled at me. Kathy tried to stop me before I reached the casket, but failed. From the moment I entered, I'd been preparing. When I reached the casket, I had plenty in my mouth. I looked at Bob lying peacefully and spat in his face, enough to dribble down onto his shirt. Kathy screamed, crying and calling me every name in the book. This time I smirked openly. 2 down, 1 to go, I said to her. She froze, fear replacing her tears. I warned you, I said softly, and walked out of the now silent funeral home. Over the next month, the cops questioned me twice more at Kathy's insistence. Just because it wasn't my car doesn't mean I wasn't involved, she claimed. They never caught the driver, and after a few months, it was old news. When the patrol car arrived at my driveway, I was expecting it. I locked up my house as my neighbors watched me being taken to the police station again. "Mr. Moore, do you know David Kent?" one detective asked, showing me a picture. "Sure do," I replied. "How do you know Mr. Kent?" "I hired him to watch my ex-wife. He's been on and off for about a month." I pushed the picture back. "Why did you hire Mr. Kent to watch your ex-wife?" "Since she took up with her now late husband, she seems to have bad luck. My kids live with her, so I hired David to ensure their safety, mostly at night."
Well, your ex-wife reported being followed.
"She saw Mr. Kent several times and called us. When we picked him up, we found out you hired him," the detective said sarcastically. "Mr. Moore, this borders on maltreatment, and you might be charged if it continues."
I'm just looking out for my kids.
"I don't care what happens to my ex, but my kids are different. If this is a problem, I'll rely on your department to ensure their safety. It's not illegal, but it's pushing the limits. Why don't you talk to your ex and work something out? Last time I tried that, I went to jail. They let me go but warned me they'd keep an eye on me. They needed a better line. I didn't pay David to be inconspicuous. I wanted Kathy to see him. The next guy I hired was even more noticeable, looking like someone from a Hell's Angels movie. He cost $30 an hour and worked 3 hours every 4th night, but he had the effect I wanted. I wanted to drive my ex over the edge. If she had a breakdown, I'd get the kids full time. I wanted my family back. "Steve, what the hell do you want?" a distraught Kathy screamed into the phone. "I want you to choke on your spit and die, Kathy." She hung up immediately. Shocked, I was waiting on my porch when the police arrived. "You're late," I told the officers. Kathy was charging me with threatening her life, but I had already contacted my lawyer, who was waiting at the station. My client did not threaten his ex-wife, my lawyer told the police. He expressed a wish, not a threat. She took it as a threat because she's still being followed by people hired by your client. It's not illegal to have someone watched unless you have a recording of Mr. Moore threatening to eliminate Mrs. Kelly. You have no case. Mr. Moore, why don't you move on? She left you, it happens. If she snaps and someone gets hurt, we'll come for you. Is there a way to end this? I asked my lawyer. My client wants his children back. If Mrs. Kelly gives up custody, he'll back off. That's for the court to decide. Then we're done here, my lawyer said, and we left. The following Sunday morning, while having breakfast and reading the newspaper on the deck, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to Kathy's parents. "Steve, do you have a minute to talk?" "Sure, come on in," I said. They were dressed for church. "Can I get you a cup of coffee?" "No, thank you. What brings you here?" I asked. Kathy's father spoke up. "Steve, we know what our daughter did wasn't right, especially with you going to jail, but she's our only child, and we don't want anything to happen to her. Look, I'm not trying to injure her. She made bad choices and is paying for them. I want my children back. They're better off with me, especially since she's having bad luck. I'd hate for something to happen to them. If something happens to her." They stared at me, unsure of what to say. "Steve, we'll talk to her, but you know how she is," Kathy's mother said, trying to ease the discomfort. "That's where you're wrong. The woman I married would never have cheated or thrown me to the sharks. I don't recognize her now, except as the mother of my children. I want her to suffer a horrible and painful end of life. I don't forgive, and I don't forget." They left quickly. I think I made my point. Thursday evening, the visitor I had been expecting finally arrived. It was just after 7 and getting dark. She must have walked because I didn't hear a car. She rang the bell. I looked through the peephole and let her in. She was already angry when she walked through the door. I had expected a phone call, but seeing her in person was better. "Come in, Kathy. Want a drink? Acid hemlock on the rocks?" I said, shutting the door. "Very funny. You really are a prick, you know that?" I opened the door. "I think we're done here. Nice." Of you to stop by. Have a short, miserable life, I said, holding the door open. I'm not leaving until we talk, she replied, sitting down gingerly in the living room. Suit yourself, I responded, closing the door and going to get a glass of wine. What brings you here? Our humble abode? I still own 50% of this house, she stated. Less what I've paid since the divorce, I reminded her. I want this place sold. What's it going to take to drop the price? She asked. An act of God. Are you willing to cover the loss with interest? I countered. I just want you out of this neighborhood and away from me, she declared. That's never going to happen, I said firmly. You still hate me that much? She inquired. More than you can imagine. It was awful how it all went down, but I never intended to get involved with Bob. It just happened, she explained. She couldn't think I was that stupid or naive. Nonsense, Kathy. Nothing just happens unless he put a weapon to your head. You went willingly. Was he so much better in bed that you destroyed our marriage and family? My anger flared. It wasn't about the lovemaking. He needed me. He had no one. We fell in love because we needed each other, she said defensively. What were you doing, charity work? I needed you, our kids needed you, our marriage needed you, but you chose your needy puppy over us. Now he's dead and a lot less needy, I retorted, smiling as I relished the memory. I only wish I had been the one driving the car that liquidated him, she confessed. Steve, you've become so hateful. Taking pleasure in someone's misfortune is sick, she admonished. I'd like to say I did this to myself, but you and your lover played a big part. That's a cop-out, Kathy. 60% of marriages fail. Not all spouses go around hating the other, I pointed out. I don't care about anyone else's marriage but mine. How long was I the fool, she asked. Does it matter, I questioned. To me it does. 2 months? 3? 5? She probed. About 5. It just happened the first time and I almost told you. I was devastated, she revealed calmly, sounding rehearsed. But you didn't tell me, and you weren't that devastated because it kept happening. How many times did you screw him in our bed? I demanded. Never. I wouldn't do that to you, she said angrily. So it was okay to screw him everywhere else? Many of our friends saw it but never told me. You proved you couldn't be trusted, I retorted. So where do we go from here? This house is our last connection, she said. What about the kids? I'm not giving them up. Nothing you say will change that, I asserted. My mind raced. Kathy, I'm not going to convince you. You got full custody because of what you drove me to do. If I hadn't gone nuts on Bob and his car, I might have had a chance. Bob got what he deserved. Now it's just the two of us. Her eyes widened. Steve, are you threatening me? She asked. Me deprive my kids of their mother? I said, dripping with sarcasm. Never. But if something should happen, like a heart attack, lightning strike, or an accident, I'll make sure the kids always remember you. If you have any last requests, you might want to write them down soon. You never know what might happen. I borrowed that line from a movie where a hitman advised his target to get his affairs in order. I'm out of here, Kathy said, standing up. We had 12 good years. I'm kind of sorry it ended. She tried to kiss my cheek, but I pushed her back, almost knocking her over. Don't ever touch me again, I warned. You're a 304. She was taken aback. I'm sorry, I just thought, she began. You thought what? That we're okay now? You make my skin crawl, I said, my eyes burning with anger. Sorry, she said, flustered and horrified. Don't be, because I'm not, I retorted. She walked out and started down the driveway. By the way, you know that look you just gave me? Bob had the same look right before the car ran over him. Too bad I didn't have a camera to show you, I added. I shut the door, watching Kathy run for her house. In truth, I was the one who started the fire at Bob's house. 2 Gatorade bottles of gasoline and a lit cigarette were all it took. I made sure everyone was out of the house. I hoped it wouldn't be reported to the fire department until the house was fully engulfed. So much for that plan. It took less than 5 minutes from start to finish, including tossing the plastic Gatorade bottles into a neighbor's recycle bin. I had excused myself to go to the bathroom, slipped out the side door, and went through the backyards to the back of Bob's house. No one even missed me. I'd like to take credit for Bob's end of life, but I can't. It was Bob being in the wrong place at the right time or just plain dumb luck. If he had looked both ways like his mother probably told him to as a kid, he'd still be alive. No matter what I say, Kathy and her family still think I was involved, and in a way I'm sorry it wasn't me. But I would never have done it. I'd been locked up in jail once, and I never wanted to go back, especially not to the joint up north. Anyway, by now, Kathy was probably at home, locking the doors, thinking she's next on my list. Am I going after her? Not a chance. I'll just drop hints and innuendos until she goes nuts, and the court gives me back my kids. I will, however, tell any prospective home buyer about the arsonist in the neighborhood who still hasn't been caught. You see, I like living right where I am, especially with my 2 children just up the street. Who knows, when they turn 13, they might just decide to live with their old dad. Well, I can hope. The only good thing that has happened to me during all of this was meeting someone I think I may have a future with. Her name is Ellen, and she works for the State Department of Corrections. I had to check in with her the first year after I was released to make sure I was adjusting, rehabilitated, and doing okay. Ellen is tough and takes no crap. After getting the formalities out of the way, we began to talk and found out we might have feelings for each other. Ethically, Ellen couldn't date me until my year of probation was up, but finally we were able to go out on a real date. I told her I had major trust issues, and she one-upped me by telling me that most convicts lie to her in one way or another. So now we're both trying to move forward and, in the process, deal with our trust issues together while getting to know each other better. Ellen got me thinking about what I've been doing ever since that 304 of a wife walked out on me. She showed me my actions were keeping me from having any kind of real life and meaningful relationships. She told me it was time to move on. She further convinced me when she said if I messed up and got thrown back in jail, my rear would be hers to do with as she wished. And, darling, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, she explained with a smile that made the hair on the back of my neck stand straight up. And you know what? I believe her. I really do. And when I'm with her, she keeps things interesting, because as tough as I think I am, Ellen is one lady I would never cross. Even better, though, is knowing in my heart she would never cross me either. I think I am finally ready to move on with my life and open myself up to love once again.